Good afternoon. It's the third Grand Prix of the season and an enthralling encounter awaits as an intense rivalry resumes on the front row in Argentina this afternoon. The track, they say, is undrivable. The car, they say, is undrivable. But nobody told Michael Schumacher as he threw down the gauntlet early in qualifying yesterday by setting the fastest time in the improving Ferrari. There was a nervous wait for Damon Hill, and then with just 4 minutes remaining, he got a clear track. By just 0.2 of a second, he secured pole position for the 13th time in his career.
Well, I'm happy to have 0.2 advantage over him, to be honest. You know, he's not the sort of person you want to give any advantage to at all. So, you know, the car will get better, the Ferrari will get better, but this is a circuit where if you do have an advantage in horsepower or in aerodynamics, it's not necessarily going to show up that much on a circuit like this because the circuit speed is so slow.
Well, Damon Hill today chases his third win this season, and including Adelaide last year, it would be a career-best 4th consecutive victory, becoming only the 10th driver in history to achieve that feat. But one who has achieved that feat is alongside him on the front row, the double world champion Michael Schumacher. Hill's Williams teammate Jacques Villeneuve starts on the 2nd row. Joining him there, Jean Alesi's Benetton. David Coulthard and Eddie Irvine are on the 5th row, and after a frustrating time yesterday, Martin Brundle and Johnny Herbert start in 15th and 17th respectively. Well, now let's enjoy the build-up to the race as we go live to Buenos Aires, and our commentators, Tony Jardine, Jonathan Palmer. First, though, it's Murray Walker.
Good afternoon from Argentina. In Melbourne, Australia, they said, what a great place for the race. Here in Buenos Aires, I say, what a great day for the race. Last year, on the Friday and Saturday, the rain lashed down like we'd seldom seen before, and it was a dull, miserable day, although it was a dry race. Here today, the temperature is 23 degrees, the humidity is 24 degrees, it having been 74 degrees. The skies are blue, the sun is shining. You can see from the bright colors of the cars on the grid that the conditions are just about ideal. And a short while ago, here at the Oscar Galvez circuit, we had a very moving ceremony when a plaque in memory of the great, many people regard the greatest racing driver of all time, Juan Manuel Fangio, was unveiled in his memory. His compatriot and racing colleague, Froilan Gonzalez, the man who won the 1951 British Grand Prix and beat the Alfa Romeos, is here. I've just passed him on my way to the box. But the thing we ought to talk about before we talk about anything else, the drivers, or the cars, or the conditions, is the track itself. It is, in places, absolutely appalling. It's very different to the Sao Paulo circuit here at Buenos Aires. The track is flat. There are a lot of 2nd and 3rd gear corners, but on the back straight, on a 160-mile-an-hour section, there are 2 gigantic bumps so bad that some of the car chassis have been delaminating during practice. Johnny Herbert had his fire extinguisher impacted and blown out in the cockpit whilst he was going round. Parts have broken, people have spun off the track, and I am expecting a lot of people to be leaving the tarmac today. But the first corner, just as Monaco and Hungary are always very demanding on a track where it is almost impossible to pass, is going to be crucial. We have those 2 rivals from 1994 and 1995, Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill on the front row of the grid. It's the first time that Schumacher's been on the front row of the grid this year since he joined Ferrari. The car is going a lot better here than it did in Brazil, as Michael said it would. And it's going to be critical to both those drivers to get into the first corner first and through it first. If Schumacher gets through it first, I think there will be a terrific race. If Damon Hill gets through it first, he may well be able to draw away from Michael Schumacher. In the warm-up this morning, we had a very dramatic development. The Benettons last year, many of you will remember, had a very torrid start to the season in Brazil and Argentina, but came good with a vengeance after Imola in Spain. This is the scene you see with Martin Brundle down there. The Benettons came good in Spain, and they seem to have done the same thing here in Argentina. I use the word seem guardedly because we'll wait and see during the race. But in the warm-up this morning, Jean Alesi and Gerhard Berger were fastest of all. Alesi is starting from 3rd on the grid. Gerhard Berger is starting from 5th on the grid. So a tremendous lineup for that first dash to the corner. Damon Hill from his pole position again. Michael Schumacher just behind him. Behind Damon Hill is his countryman Jacques Villeneuve in the second Williams Renault, who again is having to learn and has learned a new circuit. They've all been new to him. Australia, then Brazil, now here. Jean Alesi 3rd on the grid. Gerhard Berger in 4th place. Rubens Barrichello an excellent 6th. The other British drivers, incidentally, David Coulthard is 9th. Neither of the McLarens went well during practice. 8th and 9th on the grid. Eddie Irvine is 10th and slowest of all in the warm-up this morning. Martin Brundle is 15th and Johnny Herbert is 17th. So that is the background. The race is due to start in about 13 minutes' time. Quite a lot to say before then.
Yes, and the pattern that we've seen so far this year looks like continuing. Williams' team have been particularly confident, and in fact that confidence was demonstrated this morning when they were not sucked into the battle for lap times during the warm-up session. And indeed, sensational though that lap times from Alesi and Berger were at the front of the queue, I think it actually tells us more about what kind of strategy they intend to adopt for the race. Now, it's going to be a very important race strategically, I think. We've got 72 laps of this Argentine circuit. It's slow, it's twisty, overtaking is exceedingly difficult. And as the teams decide what strategy to adopt in terms of just how many stops to make, they're going to be thinking of two things. One, what is the fastest way to complete these 72 laps? Is it better to come in for more fuel stops, run the car lighter, etc.? But secondly, how are they going to overtake cars in front of them? Because it's so very difficult on the track that they may well want to use the pit stops to do so. Now, it's my guess that we're going to see 2 stops being the norm, and that means stopping around about lap 24 or lap 48. But some cars, and I think that could include... Talking about pit stop strategy there, 72 laps in this race. I would expect most to be doing 2 stops, stopping round about lap 24, lap 48. But the Benetton speed this morning was so quick that we could reasonably expect them to be seriously considering and potentially carrying out a 3-stop regime. That'll mean coming in around about lap 18 for the first, lap 36 for the second, and then lap 54 for the 3rd stop. McLaren, well, they could be doing 2, could be doing 3, but the real question has been on Williams. It looked this morning as if they were even contemplating just 1 single stop. So much was their level of confidence. But I think in reality, the increasing temperatures throughout the day are going to mean that 1 stop will just be a little bit too much of a risk. And I suspect we'll see Williams going for 2 stops after all, like the mainstream. They're not in a position at the moment when Williams need to go out on a limb to do anything particularly oddball. They just need to play it safe. They've still got the car advantage here after all.
So Jonathan and I up here in the commentary box looking down on that sun-dappled scene, but in the pit lane is Tony Jardine. What's happening down there, Tony?
I'm right alongside Jean Alesi at the moment. He's just putting on his helmet. He's looking remarkably cool and composed. And as you were just saying, both the Benettons went very, very well in warm-up indeed. Perhaps they could be the dark horses of the race. But the only other thing that I noticed on the grid here, Jock Clear, the engineer for Jacques Villeneuve in the Williams team, came to the front of the grid to speak to Charlie Whiting, the FIA technical delegate, to complain on behalf of some of the drivers that at the first corner, some of the fans have got a lot of banners over the edge of the Armco and up against the catch fencing, which is distracting them. So we'll see if those get moved by the time the race starts.
Well, you've heard about the first 10 on the grid, but I would particularly single out one driver in those top 10 and another one who's a bit lower down. Jos Verstappen, the Dutchman in the Arrows with its Hart V8 engine, driving for a team that is badly off financially, although hopefully the condition is improving considerably now that Tom Walkinshaw's organisation has taken them over. But they only have 2 cars here. They've had to be borrowing a lot of stuff from other teams. But Jos Verstappen, the man who drove for Benetton the year before last, who had just 4 races for the Simtek team before it folded last year, is starting from a quite incredible 7th on the grid. Now, that is ahead of Mika Häkkinen in his McLaren Mercedes. It's ahead of David Coulthard in his McLaren Mercedes. It's ahead of Eddie Irvine, ahead of Martin Brundle, ahead of Johnny Herbert. And that is a quite superb achievement from a man I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more of in the future. But equally good in its way is the 14th position on the grid from young 20-year-old Tasso Marquez, who made his Grand Prix debut in Sao Paulo last Sunday. He's starting 14th in the second Minardi, and he too is quicker than some very quick men. Martin Brundle, Johnny Herbert, to mention just 2 of them.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Verstappen and Marquez both being particularly impressive, but nothing this weekend has matched the spectacle of Michael Schumacher wringing the neck of that Ferrari to pull it up onto the second position on the grid. This has been one of those weekends when the skill of Schumacher really has shone through. Ferrari are currently running this year's front end, this year's chassis and engine, but with last year's 1995 gearbox, rear suspension, and the back end of the floor of the car, which is very important from a downforce point of view. Now, the reason for that is that they had some problems, reliability problems, with the new gearbox that ran at Melbourne, and for these 2 far-away races, when there's no chance to do any testing, they opted for the safe, conservative approach and grafted on the rear end of the last year's car. Now, as a result of that, we know that the Ferrari is not in its optimized form. It's difficult to drive, and Eddie Irvine, we're looking at him now, has found it particularly hard, and he's just said, look, I cannot drive this car. It's one of the hardest cars I've ever had to drive in my life, and he's been spinning from time to time, and he just is accepting the fact that he is a second or second and a half away from Schumacher. He doesn't understand how Schumacher can do it. Well, on the other hand, Eddie is also comforted by the fact that in the 1996 car, as raced in Melbourne, he was within a few tenths of a second of Schumacher. So it's going to be a hard race for Irvine. He starts from 10th place on the grid with Schumacher right up there in second. But the sight in qualifying of that vivid red Ferrari being literally thrown around the circuit like a rally car, sparks coming out of the bottom of it where it's bottoming on the ground, was absolutely superb. And I think we're going to see a real fighting performance from Schumacher here. Now, one of the good things about the track, and particularly the tyres, is the fact that the tyres, although they're a little bit softer than last year, which gives them more grip, they still last a long time. And indeed, some of the teams could go through the whole race on one set if they wanted to. Of course, though, that won't be an option. The good news for us is that it means the drivers can slide and drift these 700 horsepower cars around without the sliding, wearing the tyres and losing the tyres' performance, and therefore penalising them for adopting such exuberant driving. And that means that drivers like Lacey, as well as Schumacher, benefit.
Five minutes to go to round 3 of the 1996 Formula One World Championship here at Buenos Aires in Argentina. Damon Hill in pole position, Michael Schumacher right alongside him for the first time on the front row of the grid this year. Villeneuve and Alesi on row 2, Berger and Barrichello on row 3. And right at the back of the grid, good news, because today 22 cars and drivers will be starting here in Buenos Aires, because the 2 yellow 40 cars have qualified well within the 107% rule, which requires them to be that much off at maximum the pole position time. The 40 is getting better and better all the time, thanks to the excellent Ford Cosworth V8 Z-Tech engine. and the drivers are doing well too. So there's Verstappen, 7th, ahead of the 2 McLarens and Eddie Irvine's Ferrari. A great picture there for the young Dutchman. Princeton Sauber is going better. Katayama and Salo are both well down the grid, of great disappointment because they were hoping to go extremely well in the new 024 Tyrrell. As you see, Salo is only 16th. Johnny Herbert had an awful time in the Sauber during the qualifying and practice days, but the car is better today. They've made a lot of modifications overnight, and incidentally, the Benetton mechanics, in making those setup and suspension changes, which seem to have improved Alesi's and Berger's cars so much, were up all night. One of the famous all-nighters that mechanics occasionally have to do. There, the 2 red and white McLarens. Mika Häkkinen is the one at the bottom of your screen, and David Coulthard's the one in the background. And David is starting from his highest grid position this year, 9th, which is a pretty sad contrast to what he was doing with the Williams-Renault team last year, because he started from pole position here last year, and he won a race with Williams, of course, had 5 pole positions in all, but he's having a difficult time getting to know the McLaren. And car after car here, in team after team, has had problems in getting to grips with this track. Jacques Villeneuve went off yesterday into the tyre wall, reversed out, did extremely well, kept the engine running, reversed out, only to stall the engine to his immense frustration, and he lost half the setting up period. But he still qualified 3rd on the grid, and this morning he was 5th fastest in the warm-up. Indeed, in that significant warm-up, the 2 Benetton Renaults were followed by Michael Schumacher. Damon Hill was 4th, about 7/10 of a second off Alesi's time, but Williams fans shouldn't be too worried about that. Adrian Newey, who is the Williams designer, said, "We know what we're doing, the others can do what they like." Bernie Ecclestone, the czar of Formula One, strides confidently down the grid. He's almost at the back of it now, because on the left you see 22, Luca Badoer's 40, and in the background you see his teammate Andrea Montemini's car. Bernie was up there at the Fangio plaque this morning, paying his respects to the great ex-5 times world champion. There's a big crowd here, much bigger than last year's. There's something like 75,000 people here. It's a public holiday in Argentina and Buenos Aires, of course, and they're making the most of it. They've got some great drivers from the past to remember. Fangio, Gonzalez, Carlos Reutemann, the most recent of them. And here today, the prospects for a very long, hard race are extremely real. Last year's race took 1 hour and 53 minutes. You're in the cockpit, or just over the cockpit, of Damon Hill's Williams-Renault as they get off for the sighting lap, which precedes the 72-lap Argentine Grand Prix.
So this is the main straight. The cars will be approaching 185 miles an hour once they're underway, lapping here. This is the fastest part of the circuit. Now, as we go round, we can see where these bumps are, the notorious bumps, because there is concrete laid across the track. That shows us where the bumps are, and you'll see the cars jiggle as they go over it. So black lines being left as the rubber is laid down. The cars also using this opportunity to practice just how much grip there is. Now, there are the bumps. You can just see 2 strips of white concrete across the ground. We've had a number of cars spin off into this first corner, and indeed we must watch very carefully on the first lap, because last year on both the starts, because there had to be a restart after Alesi and Berger collided with the Ferraris, though on both starts we've had incidents. The reason being that the track is wide at that point, so a lot of cars will have a go to try and overtake, but on the other hand it's dusty on the inside. Now we're coming around to turn 4, turn 5, and then a long right-hander. Now then it's coming out of this corner, coming down towards turn 7, the fastest right-hander on the circuit, that there are the 2 notorious bumps. There is one, there is the second. And the best line is to keep to the middle of the circuit on the way through the first, then move left for the second. Short, sharp weaving required, difficult to get tyre temperature up here, but when the cars are underway, just watch how they jolt. It might not look a big bump to us from the outside, but believe me, if you can even see the car jolt from where we're looking, inside it feels like you've been banged on the head with a hammer. It really is desperately uncomfortable. Clipping the curves, also worth watching to see if anybody is on brand new tyres, any little telltale signs of those white labels. I can't see them so far, but strategy is going to be also very, very important. And a puff of smoke there. Schumacher, Villeneuve. This is called the Senna S, turn 13, and we can see that's where many cars have been spinning. It's a downhill left-hander, only about 45, 50 miles an hour. This is more like a go-kart track in many ways than a full-blown Grand Prix circuit, unlike Suzuka or Silverstone. Very tight and twisty, and we're going to see probably quite a procession of cars. Look at Barrichello there, weaving from side to side. It's that kind of movement that really pumps heat into the tyres. And then Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari, you can see the wide, bulbous cockpit sides of that Ferrari. We're expecting that to be reduced to a rather more aesthetic, less draggy configuration within a few races. Now, as they come up towards the grid, we're going to expect to see them keep to one side. Now, it looks like there Schumacher comes up onto his place. Damon Hill takes his pole position.
And remember, this first corner is going to be critical. Hill or Schumacher, or is Villeneuve going to be able to out-sprint both of them? I doubt it. They want to hold them on the grid for as short a time as possible. Charlie Whiting has programmed into the starting lights, which you will see spread across the course, the gap, which indicates that when all the lights go out, they start for the 72 laps. Damon Hill on the left, Michael Schumacher on the right. Behind Hill is Villeneuve. Behind Schumacher is Alesi. He's a quick starter. Watch for the lights going out, and then it will be... Go! Good start by Hill. Good start by Hill. And Alesi comes up and takes Villeneuve. Hill leads into the first right-hander. The Benetton coming up behind him. Schumacher takes the second place. It's the Williams leading, the Ferrari second, then the two Benettons as they go round the right-hander at turn 1. This is the left-hander at turn 3. Little short straight, and they're doing about 100 miles an hour here. We're riding with Mika Häkkinen now. Hill leads, Schumacher second. Then the two Benettons, Eddie Irvine trying to come up through the field. Unfortunately, unlike last year, they have all got away safely. Now, this is where the bumps happen. The first one is now, second now. Hill is over it, Schumacher is over it. If they all get through this time, hopefully we're going to be all right. Damon Hill leads, Schumacher is second. It's Alesi third. It is Berger in fourth position, so the two Benettons are improving. It's Mika Häkkinen fifth, it's Barrichello in sixth place, and it is Jos Verstappen in the arrows in seventh position. Terrific performance. Riding with Schumacher, chasing Damon Hill down through the Senna S's, left and right, up to 155 miles an hour. There's Barrichello. Behind him is Verstappen. We're coming up now to turn 16, the Horquilla, to complete the first lap out of 72 with Damon Hill from pole position leading in Argentina. Down towards us now. This is 175 miles an hour. Williams, Ferrari, Alesi, Benetton, Berger, Benetton. They are already easing away from the fifth position. There it is. Häkkinen, Barrichello, Verstappen, Coulthard and Villeneuve right down the field.
Well, a good clean start, excellent to see. Particularly good starts there from David Coulthard, up from 9th on the grid to 5th. He'll be thrilled with that. On the other hand, a big disappointment for Jacques Villeneuve there, 3rd on the grid, slipped right back to 9th place, just ahead of Eddie Irvine. But Benetton, if we're right in thinking that they're going to go for 3 stops, they're going to be pressurizing hard. It's looking that way. Look at Alesi there, very, very close, as good as damn it, following the Ferrari of Schumacher. And Benetton should well be some of the fastest cars on the circuit, if not the fastest, if they are the only ones of the front runners going for a 3-stop strategy. That means they'll be running lighter and hence their pace. But Damon Hill is where it matters, and that's out in front, so very difficult is it to overtake here. Plus the fact that the Williams does have a significant straight line speed advantage. with his Renault engine over the Ferrari behind, probably in the order of 3 or 4 miles an hour. Might not sound a lot, but that'll render it virtually impossible for Schumacher to overtake Damon Hill, even if he had the speed to do so, unless Damon makes a mistake.
So just sit back and enjoy this. Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, Gerhard Berger, 4 of the top men in Grand Prix racing, completing lap 2. At the end of the first lap, the gap was 0.6 of a second. Damon Hill is still commanding the race with a clear track in front of him, just as he had in Sao Paulo last weekend. The difference being, of course, that this time the track is dry. Last time it was wet, and this time Michael Schumacher's car is going very much better than it did in Brazil a week ago. But Gerhard Berger is now the fastest man on the track in the second lap of the race, and Damon Hill had extended his lead over Schumacher by 0.2 of a second to 0.8 of a second. But really, that's academic. You can see how close they are. Between Berger and Coulthard, however, 4th and 5th, 5 seconds is the gap. Round the hairpin, that is turn 8 through the S's.
Well, this is entirely consistent, I believe, with Benetton intending to make 3 pit stops in this race. Their pace is relatively good. In other words, it's virtually matching the pace of Schumacher and the Williams of Hill. And generally, Hill has been a bit quicker. I would think the indications are currently that Hill, possibly Schumacher, we don't know because Schumacher's not got a clear track in front of him. But certainly Hill is looking at a 2-stop strategy here. So he should be staying out beyond lap 20, coming in maybe lap 24, when the Benettons, if we're right, will be coming in round about lap 18. Now, the important thing for Benetton is that they really want to make best use of this lighter car and the speed while they can now. They don't want to get held up with Schumacher. They should have a straight-line speed advantage over the Ferrari to try and get by Schumacher, but Michael is not an easy man to pass.
Damon Hill extending his lead. It's now almost a second. It may not look it on the track, but it is on the clock, and Jean Alesi is starting to pressure the Ferrari. Now, Damon Hill needs another 10 championship points in this race, because mark my word, the John Barnard designed Ferrari with its new V10 engine is going to get better. It was late getting onto the Grand Prix scene because John always believes in hanging on until the last possible moment to get the design right. And so far, they've only been able to concentrate on testing for reliability. After this race, there's going to be a 4-day test in Spain at Jerez, and they're going to be concentrating on testing for development there, and there's a lot of development in the Ferrari. But now on lap 4 out of 72, you can see it's still Hill, Williams, Renault. Double world champion Michael Schumacher, there is the man in his 3rd race for Ferrari. That is Jean Alesi. There is Gerhard Berger. The gap between Berger and Coulthard is getting greater all the time. It's 6 seconds. Barrichello is still 6th. Jos Verstappen is still 7th. Jacques Villeneuve is still 8th. Hakkinen is still 9th. Eddie Irvine 10th in the Ferrari. Down the straight. This is the completion of lap 5, and Schumacher has just gone fastest over the bump into turn 1. 1 minute 31.8, 0.2 of a second faster than Damon Hill. And they are easing away from the 2 Benettons. Where went Schumacher now? Out of the left-hander at turn 3, into turn 4, 3rd gear, 100 miles an hour, into the long double right at turn 6. This is into the fastest part, 2nd fastest part of the track. They're taking this bend, approaching us at 160 miles an hour, the Ascari.
And you can just about see on top of Michael Schumacher's steering wheel the flashing red lights coming up. We've just lost it, but when we go back, as we surely will, to an onboard view from Schumacher, they have the high rev warning lights actually set into the top of the steering wheel. So as that Ferrari V10 moves up from, say, 15,000, 15,200, 15,400 towards 16,000, more of those red lights come on, and at round about what is probably somewhere between 16,000, 16,500 revs, all of them will be on, and that Schumacher sign to change gear. It helps him keep the engine right at the peak of its power band so he loses nothing at all. Now, it's my guess looking at this, Schumacher is obviously pressurizing Hill hard. It looks like the Schumacher is the quicker at the moment, but again, I suspect it's because the car of Hill is heavier with more fuel than Schumacher, and therefore that it's not quite even between the two.
Well, should that be the case, it demonstrates that Damon Hill is driving an even better race than he appears to be doing. But Michael Schumacher has demonstrated here in the last 2 days his ability to adapt his driving technique to suit the car. This is not an easy car to drive, as Eddie Irvine has found to his cost. Irvine has been saying this season that if he could get within half a second of Michael Schumacher, he would be well pleased. But Irvine was way, way off that in qualifying. Indeed, he was some 1.7 seconds off the German. And we're now on lap 6. Damon Hill is quickest. He's responded to Schumacher's challenge. Down comes the fastest lap time to 1 minute 31.693. But just look how Michael Schumacher is pushing Hill. The Williams now has got Scarlet Ferrari looming big in both the side mirrors.
This is certainly close, but further back we've got some real overtaking going on where Jacques Villeneuve has moved up from 9th to 6th place. He's now just 2.8 seconds behind David Coulthard. And you may wonder just what goes wrong when a driver of Villeneuve's experience makes a mess of the start, as clearly he did. Well, there are two things, and we'll come straight back to looking at Schumacher if this gets particularly exciting. Either they can actually drop the clutch. When we mean drop, we mean let the clutch out suddenly with too many revs, so the engine spins the back wheels, and if they're spinning too much, they don't get enough grip, and it won't thrust the car away. Or simply, he drops the clutch, slips the clutch without enough revs on. It may be something like 7,000 or 8,000, 10,000 even, in which case, then the engine will almost stall and he'll have to dip the clutch again and have another go. One of those two options certainly will have applied to Villeneuve, but now he's certainly making up progress very well indeed. And he's taken a second off David Coulthard. He's now just 1.8 seconds behind, so Villeneuve absolutely storming.
Lap 7 out of 72, almost 1/10 distance, and with Gerhard Berger now the fastest man on the track, I'm starting to catch Sean Alesi. It's Damon Hill leads Michael Schumacher, Alesi third, Berger fourth, David Coulthard 10 seconds behind the Benetton of Berger. Sixth is Villeneuve, and in 7th and 8th places Barrichello. Verstappen has dropped down a place, but he may well be pacing himself because the arrows with the Hart engine has not got the development of these cars, and if he keeps going, he's certain to be in the points. There's going to be a lot of attrition in this race. Mika Häkkinen is down in 9th position behind his teammate David Coulthard. In 10th position, it is Eddie Irvine. And Berger is still the quickest. There is Alesi, and you just saw the blue, white and green Benetton in the background of Austrian Gerhard Berger. Both Alesi and Berger have switched from Ferrari to Benetton this year. Didn't have a very good race, Berger, either in Australia or Brazil, but he's making up for it now.
Now, if we do get a glimpse of it, have a look at the Jordan of Rubens Barrichello back there in 7th place, because that Jordan is actually holding up the whole string of cars. Verstappen in 8th, Häkkinen in 9th, Irvine in 10th, Frentzen in 11th. They're all nose to tail. Miko Salas, round he goes, spinning. Well, we've seen that so often here, and we're going to see a lot more yet. Will he keep the engine running? That's the crucial thing. We didn't get a chance to see, and I think he has from looking at the monitor. That's the important thing. If you do lose the car, you want to put your foot hard on the brakes, lock the wheels up so you don't slide off the track if you can possibly help it, but at the same time you must dip the clutch so that you can keep the engine running, because these cars don't have an onboard starter. There's no button you can push to start the engine. If it stalls, that's it. You're out of the race.
Hill leads, Schumacher second, a terribly dispirited Mika Salo. Tyrrell came here with Salo and Ukyo Katayama, the Japanese driver, hoping and expecting to go much better in Argentina than they had in either Australia or Brazil, because the car suits this type of circuit. But Salo went off on the first day very early on, and the team have never really recovered from that in terms of getting the setup right, which is so critical. Now we're into the hairpin and up to the last corner and to the completion of lap 8. We are now over 1/10 distance. It's still, you can see the first four in the same shot. It's still Hill, who has just gone past Est again. driving as he did in Australia and as he did in Brazil. A calm race, totally in control. Clear track ahead of him. He is some way now behind lapping Montermini, who is the last man on the circuit at the present moment. And Damon Hill is on lap 9 as you watch Villeneuve now ahead of David Coulthard. So Jacques Villeneuve has clawed his way up through the field and he's now in 5th position.
Superb driving there from Villeneuve. He's been the one doing the overtaking. Mind you, he needed to, from having dropped right back to 9th off the grid, his 3rd position on the grid. Now let's keep an eye on what lap time he can do. How will he compare to Damon Hill? Damon Hill has just set. That was the manoeuvre. Villeneuve comes up the inside. Not as easy as it may look, because that's the dirty part of the track, but a good, clean manoeuvre. And we've seen him before. We saw in Melbourne what a hard racer Jacques Villeneuve is, and good evidence of it here. Now, though, for Villeneuve, it's about catching up. Catching that man, catching his teammate, or certainly catching the queue of cars behind Hill. And that's Schumacher 2nd and Lacey 3rd, Berger 4th. They're all pretty close together. And at the moment, Coulthard, or the previous lap, Coulthard was 14.7 seconds in 5th place behind Berger. And I think that gap's going to shrink, or certainly if Villeneuve really puts his foot down and gets on with it, he should be able to take off maybe a few tenths of a second off that. We'll keep that closely monitored.
Lap 10, and Damon Hill seems to be saying metaphorically to Michael Schumacher, anything you can do, Michael, I can do better. Because he went fastest after Michael Schumacher had. Berger has been quickest, but now Jean Alesi is the fastest man on the track, and we're riding with the French Sicilian now in the Benetton Renault. 1 minute 31.265. The lap record here is held by Michael Schumacher, 1 minute 30.522. To give you an idea of what that means in speed terms, that's just over 105 miles an hour average for this sinuous circuit. 2.64 miles long. Hill, Schumacher, Alesi, fastest man on the track. Look for Berger, he's dropping back. Jean Alesi is pulling away. The gap between Schumacher and Hill is now 1.3 seconds. It's gone up. 10th of a second by 10th of a second by 10th of a second, lap by lap. We're on lap 10 now, 1/7 race distance, almost. Here's Hill. Schumacher tears a rip-off of his visor. His visibility was being impaired. He's probably got a lot of dust and stuff being thrown back at him by Damon Hill's car. This track is very, very dusty still. It was quite appalling on Friday, improved on Saturday, better still in the warm-up this morning. It hasn't been helped, of course, by the fact that they have been solemnly grinding off part of the track in 2 successive nights in order to reduce the severity of those bumps. And that is the dashing ex-Ferrari, Jean Alesi. The gap between him and Michael Schumacher, when you were looking down at them from the helicopter, was 1.36 seconds.
Well, Villeneuve's increased his pace, but certainly not yet to match Hill. His last lap was a 1 minute 31.3 against Hill's 1 minute 31.1, so Villeneuve is just about holding the gap to Gerhard Berger, but we should soon start thinking about pit stops. They're on lap 11 now. Now, if anybody's going to be running a 3-stop strategy, and I'm pretty sure that Benetton are, and possibly, even probably Michael Schumacher, they'll need to be peeling off into the pits round about lap 18, lap 16, 17, 18, 19, somewhere of that sort of order. Now, the pit stops don't take very long here, and the main reason for that is because the pit lane itself is very short. You don't have to spend a lot of time going slowly with a speed limit of 75 miles an hour in the pit lane. We should expect about a 20-second loss in total for a stop, and if they are going to stop 3 times, then it'll be about just 6.5 seconds stationary in the pit. But that's going to be the next source of intrigue. At the moment, it looks to us as if Hill, Schumacher, Alesi and Berger are all an equal match for each other. But of course, that only will be the case if they're carrying the same amount of fuel. And the basic rule of thumb is that he who stays out longer is doing better. That means his car was heavier because it's got more fuel in it. And I suspect that that accolade is going to go to Damon Hill,
who I suspect is finding his Williams Renault a lot easier to drive than Michael Schumacher is finding his Ferrari. And a mark of the genius of Michael Schumacher is that he's in 10th position on second position on lap 12, 2 seconds behind Damon Hill. His teammate Eddie Irvine is down in 10th position, 31 seconds behind Damon Hill. And we ride with Jean Alesi.
So you've just watched the hand positions of Jean Alesi and indeed the other drivers. When we get a chance to see Alesi again, you'll see that he holds the steering wheel in pretty much a 10 o'clock or even 10:30, 1:30 position. His hands are almost on top of the wheel as opposed to the 9 o'clock, 3 o'clock position more normally associated with driving racing cars. A unique characteristic to Alesi, as well as that, his habit of canting his head right over, and now with these wider cockpit sides, actually leaning it virtually against the side of it.
Now, all the top 5 men in the race at the present moment, Hill, Schumacher, Alesi, Berger and Villeneuve, have at some point or other been the fastest man on the track, because now it's Jacques Villeneuve's turn. He's pulled the bung out, he's in 5th position, he's 14 seconds behind Berger, but he's closing the gap. 1 minute 31.093 is the fastest lap we have had so far, and that is about half a second off the lap record. They've still got a comparatively heavy fuel load. And Jacques Villeneuve is the man. There he is. This is his 3rd Grand Prix. The man who won the Indy 500 last year and was the Indy racing champion last year. Very much the hero of Canada. And I should think the Montreal circuit is going to be absolutely packed out in June for the Canadian Grand Prix. There is Alesi, 2.2 seconds behind Michael Schumacher, and Hill is just maintaining that gap nicely. 4 seconds covers the first 4. 5.5 seconds covers the first 5, and off goes Jos Verstappen, but he's managed to keep it rolling and avoid the aggregate trap as opposed to a gravel trap, and he will, I hope, rejoin the circuit. He left it in 11th position. Lap 13, Hill, Schumacher, Alesi, Berger, Villeneuve and Coulthard.
Yes, I'm not sure that that wasn't a replay, in fact, and that he is currently in 11th position, having had that off and regained the circuit. The lap that he last did was a 1 minute 39. That's about 6 seconds slower than a normal lap, so that would be consistent with having that moment and coming back on the track.
Yes, and remember what I was saying about Ferrari having tested for reliability. Schumacher, no reliability problems so far. As a matter of fact, all 22 starters are still running on lap 14 of the Argentine Grand Prix, and that is David Coulthard, who is in 6th position. Look for the gold Jordan of Rubens Barrichello. There it is behind him. He's sandwiched between the 2 McLarens because Häkkinen is 8th behind Barrichello.
And when you get a chance to see that Jordan again, you'll see that it carries an extra wing, a mid-wing just above the engine of the car. That's in the quest for extra downforce. And you can see too how all of the cars, all of the front-running cars, have this camera set in the fin above the airbox, just above Damon Hill's helmet is the entry to the engine. That's the air entry. That's crucial. Benetton have not got that area quite right yet, and to get maximum horsepower, you need to have the aerodynamics of that air inlet correct so that you get the ram effect. And on top of that, that small fin sticking up, that is where the camera is situated these days to give us these wonderful pictures.
David Coulthard may be 6th in the McLaren, but with Eddie Irvine in 9th position, the next British driver is Martin Brundle, who is most unhappy with the Jordan Peugeot here. He just cannot get it to handle the way he wants to. He has a very different driving technique to Rubens Barrichello, who is in 7th position, and Martin can't cope with it at the present moment. He was saying this morning, I feel like stepping off the top of that building there at the present moment, but he'll get it right. And he's in 12th position with Johnny Herbert 2 places behind him in 14th position. And we're in the Benetton now of Jean Alesi. The car in front of us is that of Michael Schumacher. They are starting to get ready in some of the garages to receive people. This is lap 15, so it's exactly as Jonathan forecast. 3 stoppers will be coming in very shortly. Damon Hill leading Michael Schumacher by 1.8 seconds, so the gap has come down just a little, goes up according to that caption. Alesi in 3rd position, the fastest man on the track. but these three are holding station.
Now, apart from waiting to see if these three come in, and again, we're expecting the Benettons to if they're on a three-stop strategy, this could also provide the opportunity for a Lacey to get ahead of Schumacher. If Schumacher is on a three-stop strategy too, he'll need to come in. Benetton's pit-stop strategy was legendary last year, and by doing a shorter stop than Ferrari, that could leapfrog a Lacey ahead of Schumacher. If Schumacher does a stop, if they both basically do 8-second stops or thereabouts, and that's the kind of advantage, that's the overtaking advantage that can come from getting your pit stop routine super slick.
Now, this is turn 1. They turn into the pit lane after turn 15 and before the double 90-degree right hand of the last corner on the track. Damon Hill at the present moment is going round the left-hander at turn 3. We're back again with Damon Hill. That's turn 3 behind us, and he's coming up to lap, I think, Luca Badoer. We'll soon see. It'll be the distinctive yellow car. It's certainly not Luca Badoer. There is Hill. It's Mika Salo who... It's Katayama there on the inside, battling with Martin Brundle. Brundle in the gold Jordan in 12th position, and he's just been taken by Katayama, who dived up the inside of him on lap 16. Is this going to be the first of the fuel and car stops for the top men? Damon Hill is back again as the fastest on the track. 2.6 seconds now is his lead. It's gone up quite dramatically as he's threading his way through the traffic. Now, last year, Damon Hill was criticised by a lot of people for his alleged inability to pass. Well, if he did have an inability to pass, which I don't agree with, he's certainly got it now. He's just carving his way through the tail enders. Michael Schumacher is doing the same behind him. Damon Hill has just gone through to complete his 16th lap. The gap remains at 2.7 seconds, and that is Luca Badoer in the yellow 40, who is now going to be taken by Michael Schumacher. That is Jean Alesi. There is Gerhard Berger, who has done a fastest lap, but is now dropping back. Villeneuve is still 5th, but not making any progress on Berger in the Benetton in front of him. The gap between Villeneuve, 5th position in the Williams Renault, and Berger's Benetton is 14 seconds, and David Coulthard is 6th. And the Tyrrell team are working on Mika Salo's car. Looks as though they're removing rubbish from the front of the radiator as Michael Schumacher goes past Badoer's 40. And this is going to be a really, really miserable day for Mika Salo, who came here hoping for so much. Jean Alesi, who collided, you will remember, in the first Grand Prix of the year, is up behind Badoer. There's Badoer in front of us. And Jean will not be too happy about this because he was much closer to Michael Schumacher earlier on. Schumacher's got past. That's one of the Minardis. It is that of Tarso Marques, the 20-year-old Brazilian that I was praising so much. 15th position out from his first pit stop here.
And you can see there the flashes of white on the tyres. That indicates that Marques is on brand new Goodyear tyres. He's still got the labels on, and in fact that will give him, or anybody else that runs brand new tyres, a performance advantage in the early stages until the tyres get fully up to temperature, or indeed probably for another 5 or 10 laps, because brand new tyres are always a little bit quicker than tyres that have already been run. The downside risk is that they can tend to lose performance faster too if they're running too near or even over their critical temperature. Now, I don't think we're going to have that situation. It's warm here in Argentina, but not warm enough for that to be a problem.
You're watching Villeneuve, 5th position. You just saw Damon Hill lap the second man of his race. That is Montemini, so he's passed both the 40s. There is the proof. That's Damon Hill. There is Montemini. Behind him, Michael Schumacher, who has yet to lap the 40. Mika Salo still stuck in the pits, having had trouble earlier on when he went off, and he may well have damaged the under part of the car, as Villeneuve damaged the under part of his Williams Renault at Melbourne, which may well have cost him the race on account of the fact that it fractured an oil pipe. And Damon Hill still very much in control. This is lap 18. It's a 72-lap race. Schumacher is dropping back all the time because he's yet to get past Montemini, and Damon Hill's lead, which was at one time just about half a car's length, with Michael Schumacher's Ferrari nose practically touching the Williams gearbox, is now over 4 seconds ahead of the world champion. Indeed, it's 5 seconds now. There's Hill. There is Schumacher. That's the gap between him and Jean Alesi, number 3 in the Benetton Renault, 3rd position. And he is 2.5 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, with Villeneuve 5th, making no impression at all. And surely they must be coming in for their first tyre stop soon.
Well, I think possibly not, because I think now on lap 19, with nobody having stopped apart from the Minardi and Marquez, I think we now have the evidence to suggest that no one of the front runners at least is going to make 3 stops, but it's going to be 2. And in that case, the first stop would arithmetically be around about lap 24. So again, somewhere between lap 22, lap 26 could be the time when we're going to see any of these 4 front runners come in. And the crucial question is, are they all on fundamentally the same strategy, in other words, stopping twice? Or could it even be that Damon Hill is going to stop just once? I find that hard to believe, but we really won't know. If we still find Damon Hill is out lapping after lap 26, lap 27, then it looks like Williams could be doing, or are doing, what it looked like in the morning, and that's just making 1 single stop. But I cannot believe that we're going to see that option pursued by Schumacher there, or the 2 Benetton cars behind. I'm convinced that they will be in round about lap 24 for the first of 2 stops.
It's getting closer and closer for 2nd position. There's Schumacher. There is Alesi. The gap is down to 1.2 seconds as Gerhard Berger in 4th position crosses the line. And there's still only 10 seconds on lap 20 out of 72 between the leader, Damon Hill, already the winner of 15 Grand Prix in his career, starting from 13th pole position of his career, looking really, really good this year, leading the World Championship by 14 clear points after just 2 races, an absolutely enormous margin. And the race has settled down. Into the pits comes Mika Häkkinen, and he's coming in from 11th position. Now, this is the first of the major pit stops.
Well, this is too slow for a normal pit stop. I think Häkkinen has got some kind of a problem there. Looks like he's not happy with the car. Could it be engine? This is certainly not a rush into the pit job. We'll have to wait and see when we come back to the camera what's going on, what the McLaren mechanics are doing. Well, they're wheeling the car in. It's coming into, this is the position that the car should have been in, where those yellow markings are. Had he been in for a quick fill-up and tyre change, the car's being wheeled into the pits. It looks like the end of Mika Häkkinen's race. It's been a sad weekend for him after the great start that Häkkinen's had to the year, at least making the best use of a McLaren that's not yet fully developed. It's a shame that his qualifying position slipped back. He qualified in 8th place here. He was 5th in the first Grand Prix, 7th in Brazil. Now, that is a significant, that looks like that is the Ferrari team waiting for the pit stop that is either going to be for Eddie Irvine or for Schumacher.
Well, bitter goal for McLaren. Their performance does not seem to be improving at all, Grand Prix by Grand Prix, in comparison with last year's unsuccessful car, let alone the new one, which Mika Häkkinen and Coulthard are driving.
Now, we know that Benetton are getting ready for their first stop. We can see that. I think this is consistent with the first of just 2 stops. As I've said before, there's Ferrari. Now, what is going to be crucial is, can Benetton get Alesi out ahead of Michael Schumacher, if indeed it is Alesi who's going to be brought into the pits? At the moment, Alesi is just 1.2 seconds behind Schumacher. Now, that is close enough for slick pit work from the Benetton team, and indeed clever strategy, because if Benetton opt to put a little bit less fuel in than, say, 1/3 distance fuel, which would be 70 litres, it would take less time to go in, because fuel is put into these cars at the rate of 12 litres per second. So if they put just 12 litres less in, it'll take them a second less. And Schumacher is in. Schumacher's in for the first of the pit stops from the front runners.
But it looked to me as though Jean Alesi went on, in which case he moves up into 2nd place over the speed limit line, down to 75 miles an hour. Comes the world champion, and Michael Schumacher is stopping on lap 22. The But Ferrari mechanics are usually extremely slick. 7.1 seconds for Michael Schumacher, who blasts out of the pit lane, keeping down to that 75-mile-an-hour limit. And Alesi is now taking advantage of the situation and is the fastest man on the track as Schumacher joins in front of Jacques Villeneuve, and Mika Häkkinen looks gloomily at the back of his retired McLaren. Lap 22 then. Damon Hill still out. There he is coming up. And that is Tasso Marquez in the second Minardi as Damon Hill closes up on Rosset in the Arrow's Heart. And Rosset is in 17th position. So Hill has lapped everybody up to Rosset, including Marquez Badoa and Montemini, both of whom we've seen him go past. He's on lap 22 now. One stop, Michael Schumacher. Alesi, the fastest man on the track, now up into second position, and here is Damon coming towards us. Well, he's staying out.
He is at the moment, but the Williams crew are also ready, and Villeneuve and Hill are lapping at the same lap times, more or less, so it could be either of these drivers. I would suspect, indeed, it's Damon Hill. Now, Damon's got a 5.6-second advantage. That's comfortable. He has no risk of being overtaken. And that's a Benetton. Now, is it Alesi? Yes, it is Alesi. We need to see, will he get out ahead of Schumacher? 5 seconds to stop. That was 1.5 seconds quicker. This is on target. It's looking good.
Sensational stop by Jean Alesi, 2.1 seconds faster than Michael Schumacher. And then there is Schumacher in the background. Now, Alesi is up to speed. Schumacher goes past him. He's failed to do it, so Schumacher must have put in a tremendously quick lap. And he's got Villeneuve right behind him, who is pushing Alesi, still on coldish in comparison with race temperature tyres. A terrific development. Damon Hill leads. Berger is now in second position. You can see the battle between Schumacher, Alesi and Villeneuve on the track. And Damon Hill is now 7.5 seconds ahead. More than that, in fact, with Berger in second position. He's 10 seconds ahead. This is Damon Hill leading in Argentina, lap 23.
Now there you can see just how critical these fuel stops are as an overtaking mechanism. Benetton did exactly what we suspected. The stop was shorter, and the reason was surely that they put a little bit less fuel into that Benetton of Alesi than went into the Ferrari of Schumacher. And it was so close to working. Ferrari there getting ready for Eddie Irvine coming in. If that had just been another couple of tenths of a second, Alesi would have got the all-important line on the inside into that corner, turn one, and with a bit of deft driving, that could have kept him ahead of Schumacher. As it is, I don't think there's much chance of him getting by. I might be wrong, but he's probably now resigned to another 20 or so laps of following Schumacher without being able to get by. It'll give us a great scrap to watch, but whether or not there'll be any overtaking, I somehow doubt.
Well, Berger is 10 seconds behind Hill and is held up by a couple of slower men that Hill has passed. That is Villeneuve. Ahead of him is Alesi. And there's a replay of Jean Alesi being passed by Michael Schumacher, who moves into third position after his first pit stop as Damon Hill remorselessly continues driving a smooth, careful, beautiful race in the best car in Formula One at the present moment, and that is the Williams Renault, and there is the Williams team already. I'm looking directly across the track at them now, and I can see them looking down. They're testing the wheel guns as they wait for Damon to come in, and there he is. Race leader Damon Hill coming in, and he is 10 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. So the lead will change. Look for the white line. That's it. Down to 75 miles an hour. And I'm looking across the track now to see Gerhard Berger go through and take the lead of the Argentine Grand Prix as you watch Damon Hill. And Berger comes, there's a Benetton just come in immediately behind Damon Hill, and it's Berger. So, Schumacher is not going to be able to get back into the lead. Damon Hill, this is a superb development in the race because Damon Hill has come in, taken on new tyres and more fuel and rejoined the race ahead of Michael Schumacher. There's the proof. And behind him is Alesi. That is Villeneuve, who is now in fourth position. So down at best to 5th place goes Gerhard Berger. He has rejoined in 5th position. And David Coulthard is 6th. Rubens Barrichello is 7th. And all the top 4 men, Hill, Berger, Schumacher and De Lacy, have made their first pit stop.
Yes, Hill certainly got out ahead of Schumacher, of course, but not as far ahead as he would have liked to have been. You can see the gap there. And there is another look, I'm sure, at the manoeuvre of Lacy as he came out of the pits on those few tyres about 3 laps ago. The fuel stop of Damon Hill was longer. I think they put more fuel into that car. That's a suspicion. But also, I have a hunch that the actual pit work wasn't as slick as it was either with the Ferrari Schumacher or there Jean Lacy. Now, here's a point of interest. We saw from the pit stops that Schumacher was stationary with the Ferrari for 7.1 seconds. Lacy was stationary, according to the stopwatch on the screen, for 5.0. And yet, Schumacher's time in the pit lane, and this is some data that we have taken from the line, that white line on the way in to the white line on the way out, was 24.6 seconds, Lacy 24.3. So despite being nearly 2 seconds faster on stop time, Lacy was only 0.3 of a second faster overall. Now, the conclusion we draw from that is that Michael Schumacher was once again so expert, so clever at making sure that he did not lose any more time than he had to in coming into the pits and going out. He really is able to keep the speed on to the last possible moment and then take it off on the way out. As Jacques Villeneuve has his stop, well, that's quite a long stop, 11.8 compared to 9.6 for Damon Hill, so a fair bit of fuel going in, but that'll take him through to round about lap 48. But anyway, Villeneuve is fairly comfortable there. He was in 4th place. He'll now be back to 5th. Of course, with Gerhard Berger will be going by.
Lap 26 in this 72-lap race, and Damon Hill, having made his stop, is leading Schumacher and Lacy that you look at now by 4.3 seconds. Lacy pressuring the Ferrari driver. Villeneuve is down to 5th position. Gerhard Berger in 4th place. David Coulthard is 6th. Barrichello is 7th. Irvine is 8th. Frentzen is 9th. Verstappen, still going well in the arrows, is 10th, ahead of Martin Brundle, and Parnis is Ligier. Pedro Lamy is 13th. Deniz is in 14th position. Tarso Marquez has not been lapped. He's in 17th position. We have a couple of retirements. Mika Hakkinen, Mika Salo, I haven't seen recently, but there are 20 competitors still running as Schumacher and Lacy go through. There is Damon Hill, and in the background, that battle for 2nd position down this 175-mile-an-hour start and finish straight over the relayed portions at turn 1 and onto the rest of the lap.
Now, the fact that these first 3 teams, Williams, Ferrari and Benetton, have all made their first stops within a few laps of each other confirms the fact that the performance of the cars is comparable from one to the other. David Coulthard coming in for his first stop. It's a game we're expecting round about 7-8 seconds, I think, should be the order. Hakkinen, by the way, retired from a broken throttle, we've heard. So car goes down. They put the car down before taking the refueling hose off. Eddie Irvine then goes out from his stop. Coulthard goes out. New tyres visible on that McLaren. So back to the front battle, though. The crucial thing is that Hill, Schumacher and Lacy, Berger, and that's a 40 car, I believe.
Yes, it is indeed. So it's either Montemini or Badeur, and whoever it is seems to be all right as he's wriggling out. You can just see he's taken the steering wheel off. Now, is it Luca Badeur? We can't see the number or the distinguishing stripes. Well, he's wriggling out of the car. Marshall's not being a great deal of help. And it is Luca Badeur. Luca Badeur, the young Italian. Well, a helping hand wouldn't be amiss, fellas.
Absolutely. Whether they're too terrified of what's going on, I really don't know. But that is a very timid bit of marshalling there. Now, it looks like Luca Badeur, he's not impressed with the assistance he's getting. We'd love to know quite how that dramatic-looking incident developed. It looks like it sort of touched wheels with another car. Whether Badeur was closely following or battling with another car, we don't know, I dare say. And the safety car is out. There is the incident. It looked like it was a Ligier, possibly Diniz, a tangle, these open wheelers, wheels tangling, and that's what somersaulted the 40 of Badeur over.
Now, this is going to transform the race. Damon Hill's hard-fought 5.2-second lead as you watch Luca Badar. I'm glad to say he's okay, seemingly. That's Mika Hakkinen. Damon Hill's hard-won 5.2-second lap is going to disappear because the procedure with the safety car is that the cars have to line up behind it, one at a time, and the man in the safety car, the observer, then waves everybody past the car until he is followed by the race leader. Now you can make your way around the track and catch up the tail of the procession, but you mustn't pass anybody. And then eventually the safety car, which has lights flashing on its roof, will turn those lights out when the race start clear has been given, and he will do that lap and come into the pit lane, and the race will restart. And Damon Hill will have it all to do again.
So, who are going to be the winners and who are going to be the losers from the safety car coming out? Well, Rubens Barrichello has not pitted at all yet, so I suggest that we're going to see him peeling in, and he's going to benefit from the cars going around, so he's going to gain. But the other one who's really going to gain, of even greater significance probably, is Jacques Villeneuve, because he was some 14 seconds behind Gerhard Berger, and the chances are that if the safety car stays out for more than 2 or 3 laps, and I'm sure it will, that gap will be closed right up. The safety car now should be letting the other cars overtake it, and now here's another view there. We can see the rolling 40 cars. We'd like just to pan left, please. Can we have a little look to the left? There is the Ligier of Pedro Diniz. It looked as if there was there certainly was a tangle between Diniz and Badoa, and I think with Diniz probably ahead, Badoa maybe trying to overtake, that ended up with that lapping. Now there is Barrichello. He's coming in. This has worked very well for Barrichello. Going out the mid-wing on that Jordan. You need downforce around this circuit. It's so tight, so twisty. You just want maximum grip. New tyres. This could really be quite a fortunate situation for Rubens Barrichello. Now, you see, the safety cars let everybody go by up to the leader. And the leader, of course, is Damon Hill. So what we're going to have is a complete closing up of the whole field behind Damon Hill. Now, that's put a lot of pressure on Hill, and it's going to be a benefit to Schumacher. He'd slipped back a little bit. That's Olivier Panis in the Ligier. He's had his stop too. This is quite fortunate. It's my suspicion that what's happened here is that Panis and Barrichello were actually only going to stop once in this race, and that would be lap 36. They're coming in on lap 29. The question is their tank capacity big enough for it to hold sufficient to get to the end of the race without a further splash and dash in the last few parts of the race, last few laps of the race? Well, all very close together. Schumacher right on the back of Hill. Damon Hill's going to have to be careful when that pace car peels off, not to get overtaken by Schumacher. Schumacher's going to be concentrating on thinking now, as we look at the 40 being taken away, Schumacher's going to be working on a strategy for getting the jump on Damon Hill. Not going to be easy, but that's what's going to be happening all the way down the field behind the cars following the pace car. Now, at the back of this 4-car run, we can see Berger. What we need to watch for is Jacques Villeneuve. He will be relentlessly closing up at the moment, because until the cars come up in the queue behind the pace car, they're continuing at racing pace. Look in the distance. Well, I still can't see Villeneuve. We're looking to our right. Yes, I think that's him. He was just coming into the picture. This means that Villeneuve is going to be right up with Berger, and we now have Schumacher, Alesi and Berger in a Williams sandwich.
You may regard this as a good thing or a parody of justice. Villeneuve was 46 seconds behind Damon Hill when the safety car came out. He's going to be right up behind Gerhard Berger, who is in 4th place when the safety car peels off. You'll see as we ride with Damon Hill, and off goes Ukyo Katayama out of the race. It looks, he's being pushed away by the marshals. And incidentally, if the marshals were not very helpful to Luca Badoa, at least they did a good job in getting rid of his car, because the 40 was removed by the mobile crane from the gravel trap very quickly indeed. I don't think it's going to be very much longer before the race starts. We're on lap 30 now, because the laps continue to be counted behind the pace car. Lap 30 out of 72, coming up towards half distance in a race that's been full of incident and excitement already, with Damon Hill leading all the way. And now everybody up to and including 10th place Rubens Barrichello has been in and made their fuel and tyre stop. And as you see, they are now in crocodile fashion and Damon Hill is ahead. Out goes the, and my goodness, I can't see whether it's a Ligier or whether a 40. They both have the same sponsor, basically. Oh, it's a Ligier, and it's Pedro Diniz. Pedro Diniz, his car burst into flames. Another task for the marshals, which they seem to be coping with well. Here's a replay now. Let's see if we can see what happened. There is the Ligier. The engine blows. That's the Mugen Honda engine. Erupts behind him. A fuel line has broken, obviously, and that colossal sheet of flame. My goodness, Pedro Diniz was jolly lucky to get out of that. Remember the first fire that we had at Hockenheim 2 years ago when Jos Verstappen got caught in the flames in his Benetton. Well, Pedro Diniz out of the car, and we now wait for the race to restart, and I think this is going to delay it a bit, inevitably.
Well, thank goodness for that. What a terrifying incident there. Pedro Diniz will be very, very grateful for all of the safety precautions that are around, particularly with his equipment. His helmet, his fireproof balaclava, fireproof overalls, all of those things would have given him the precious seconds that it took. And obviously he had a bit of presence of mind. He didn't panic, and it must be very easy to panic. Let's have another look. The engine explodes in what must have been a fairly major way. Potentially bits of metal coming out of that engine, puncturing an oil line, a fuel line. Looks with the speed of that fire, I'd say it's a fuel line. Fuel spraying around the car. And Diniz at this moment will have been grappling for his buckle inside the car. He will know that he hasn't hit anything. That's the most important thing. He's not going to be physically disabled from getting out. He leaps out of the car and away. What a huge relief there. But back on the circuit now, interesting there, looking at there's maybe some debris to clean up off that circuit. We saw some burning fuel on the track itself. We don't know what they're doing about it at the moment, or indeed if anything needs to be done. But the drivers are going to be having to keep, as we can see now, exactly, they're waving around, of course, keeping the heat into those tires. The engines will be cooling off. It's very important to have everything poised, ready to go. Now, the sequence of events that we need to look for is to start with the pace car at the moment, or certainly when it was relapping around, when we see it again, it will have its lights flashing. It's got the lights flashing on top of that pace car. The next thing that's going to happen prior to the race restarting is that the lights will be extinguished. A replay of the Diniz fire. And again, with little we can say, oh, well, that's going on. It's too spectacular to digress onto anything else. Again, smoke, it's so fast for these things to catch a light. Fire coming out of absolutely everywhere, but it's gone out fairly quickly too. It would have been a flash fire from a certain amount of petrol. That's where you can see it already abating as the fuel that was burnt out, or the fuel that leaked is burning. Now, back to the pace car situation. The lights will go off on that pace car at a certain time. Then the pace car will continue round for one further lap with the cars all behind it, and then the pace car will pull off, and there will be green flags shown all the way around the circuit, which means that the drivers cannot overtake until a further lap when all of those green flags are then pulled in, and then the race will restart with overtaking permitted.
Threading through the Senna S. There's the safety car, and this is the order. Following it, in the lead still, on lap 31 out of 72, Damon Hill. There's the Ferrari of Schumacher. Behind him is Berger's Benetton, Lacey and Berger. There is Eddie Irvine, Verstappen. Bringing up the rear is Montermini, and it's going to be another lap behind the pace car. Now, meantime, there is a problem for the cars and drivers, not only in terms of keeping the tires warm, but...
And the lights are off on the safety car. The lights are off, and so this will be the final lap that the safety car is out before. Now, that is the Ligier of Panis. He's come in for his... Panis is his second fueling stop. Now, that's quite cunning, too, using the opportunity of the pace car to fill the car up with enough fuel, probably to get to the end of the race. Because don't forget, every lap counts. Even laps behind the pace car still count, and they're gradually ticking away towards the total of the 72 for the race.
Lap 31 and 12 seconds covers the top 15 on the track. In other words, it is a rolling start, a rolling restart of the Argentine Grand Prix, and it'll be happening at the start of the 32nd lap with 40 laps still to go.
Now, in a minute, watch for the marshals, watch for them displaying green flags. All the time that they're displaying green flags, they won't be allowed to overtake until those green flags are withdrawn. And of course, it's in this sort of situation, Jacques Villeneuve, with his great experience of pace cars that they have in IndyCar racing, who should be, in theory, the best position to benefit from the event of the pace car now. On the other hand, there's little he can do, really, apart from make sure that he's in the best position to pounce as and when the green flags all come in and off they go. But it's closed the race completely up, and once again, the beneficiary, the greatest beneficiary, is Jacques Villeneuve. Damon Hill has lost that comfortable 5.5-second cushion, and he also knows that he hasn't got a big advantage on pace either, because Schumacher and the Benettons were both able to lap fairly close to his time on the same refueling strategy. So we're in for a close race. There's no doubt about it.
Well, you all watch Jacques Villeneuve. I'm going to be watching Jean Alesi, the French Sicilian charger, who is tucked up behind Michael Schumacher's V10 Ferrari. Alesi in the Benetton Renault. Damon Hill leads all of them. We're riding in the pace car at the moment, looking back at Damon in his 54th career Grand Prix. Off goes the pace car, on goes the race. The Argentine Grand Prix recommences, and Alesi is tucked up right behind Michael Schumacher as Damon Hill sprints away with a clear track in front of him. The rest of them accelerate away, and look how close it is. This is lap 33. Hill, Schumacher, Alesi, Berger, Villeneuve. Behind Villeneuve in 6th position is David Coulthard. And it is crucial for Damon Hill now that he keeps the pressure up at the front as Schumacher pushes very hard, and there's a spinner in the background there. I just saw somebody go off at the left-hander. It was Frentzen. Heinz-Harald Frentzen has gone off, and he was in 7th position, and he's out of the race because he's obviously stalled the engine and he couldn't drive out of that gravel trap anyway. The bottom of his car will have beached. He'll have no grip for the rear wheels. And again, the marshals, they're certainly earning their money here in Buenos Aires today. And the question is that Sauber in neutral gear? The driver is supposed to make sure when he gets out that it is, so that they can get rid of it. But it's not always at the top of their minds when they're jumping out of a stricken motor car. So, away from the track walks Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the German compatriot of Michael Schumacher, who's in the Scarlet Ferrari behind that man, Damon Hill, on lap 33, and Alesi really wrestling with the steering wheel as they come out of the right-hander into the straight. And this is the straight down to turn 8. Hill, Schumacher, Alesi. Berger is 4th, Villeneuve is 5th, Coulthard is 6th. And the green flag should be being withdrawn now, I would anticipate. So now racing can commence. And don't let's forget, on that previous lap, they were not allowed to overtake. So quite what Frentzen was doing, going off, I don't know. And Villeneuve goes for Berger. No, he tucks back in. It just may be that Frentzen slid on the oil, on the fuel, as a consequence of that Diniz blow-up. And Damon Hill looks to me as though already, having got the hammer well and truly down, he's starting to ease away from Michael Schumacher, who's got Alesi right behind him. That is Berger, then Villeneuve, 5th position. David Coulthard is still 6th. Jos Verstappen, in the primarily red, white and blue arrows, is in a superb 7th position. Let's hope he can keep the car running. I'm sure that a lot of Grand Prix teams are already starting to look at him for 1997. But here's the top 3. And there is the man in 2nd place here, as off goes the Minardi of Tarso Marquez. He was out of the race. The young Brazilian, retirement for him. He spun off. There he is, walking away. Now let's see what happened. Oh, that was quite a big mounting job as his left front wheel rides over the right rear, leaps up into the air, breaks the suspension, I suspect, certainly breaks the front wing, and Damon Hill leads. Schumacher is 2nd, Alesi is 3rd, Berger is 4th. In the background was Jacques Villeneuve, son of the great Gilles. And you've been watching this. Tony Jardine in the pit lane has got some views. What are they?
I first of all spoke to Luca Badoa, and as you said, very fortunately, he's okay, but he wasn't happy, and he certainly wasn't happy that he didn't get much help. He said Deniz touched him and the tires fused together and the car went over, but he's okay. I went down to the Ligier pit just as the Ligier men were nervously making a stop for Olivier Panis, but Steve Clark, the English engineer, didn't know what had happened, but the Mugen Honda men suspect there was a fuel leak which caused that fire later on. I've also just spoken to Katayama, who walked in, and he suspects his gearbox or his differential has broken.
Our man in the pit lane, Tony Jardine, on top of it all, and Damon Hill is in front of the race. There's the proof. Hill, Schumacher, Alesi, Berger, Villeneuve, first, second, third, fourth, fifth. Frentzen out of the race, being a bit precipitate about something. Deniz out, Katayama out, Salo out, Rosset out, Badoa out, and Mika Hakkinen out. There are 15 of the original 22 runner starters still running in the Argentine Grand Prix on lap 35, and the next lap is going to be the half-distance lap. You've seen a lot of action. There's more to come, believe me.
And I think it's going to be coming from Villeneuve and Berger next. That's my feeling, because Berger is driving quite an inspired race. He's not a match these days, I don't feel, for Jean Alesi. He doesn't have Alesi's tigering instinct. He's not as motivated, quite frankly, I don't think, particularly when things don't go well. But here in Argentina, they are going well for Berger, and so he's really hanging on extremely well. He's just a second or so behind Alesi. Nothing really in it. But the problem for Berger is that he's now got, after that safety car compression of the field, he's got Villeneuve. Well, Villeneuve slipped back a little bit. I was going to say I think Villeneuve is going to be soon all over the back of the Benetton, and Villeneuve is a very hard racer. Once again, we've seen it before. Berger will be guaranteed to defend his position hard, though, and I suspect it's between those two where we will see the best action in terms of potential overtaking for the next 10 or so laps.
Well, Villeneuve lost 0.4 of a second on that last lap, but it's Williams-Renault leading. Ferrari second, Benetton third, Benetton fourth, Williams-Renault fifth, and the McLaren Mercedes of David Coulthard is in the points. First time for him in the points this season, in sixth position. And in terms of teams and the Constructors' Championship, both Benetton and Williams have got both their cars in the top 6 point-scoring positions. You can see them all together there. And Michael Schumacher is having to fight very, very hard indeed to keep Jean Alesi behind him. He's got 2 problems, has Schumacher. One is to get closer to Damon Hill in an effort to pressure the Englishman into making a mistake so that he can get past. And the other, of course, is to make sure that he's not pressured into a mistake by Jean Alesi behind him. You're looking down at them now. Hill, Schumacher, Ferrari V10. The engine designed by the ex-Honda Japanese engineer Osamu Goto, and he's done a fine job of it and has broken Ferrari's traditional adherence to the V12 layout. John Barnard pushed them, and that's a replay of Marquez going off.
Well, I'm afraid Marquez has only himself to blame for that. He braked simply too late, and I think that must have been Martin Brundle. It was certainly one of the Jordans ahead, and Marquez's left front wheel rode up over the back of the right rear of the Jordan. And of course that is one of the big dangers, we said so often, of these open wheeler cars. And interestingly, the newly, if not formed, but the newly instated GPDA, led by Michael Schumacher, Martin Brundle, and this is the Grand Prix Drivers Association. That's with Gerhard Berger, Michael Schumacher and Martin Brundle fronting it up. They have said that one of the things they'd like to look at for future regulations in the quest for further safety is protection of the back of the rear wheel, so that that kind of incident would not tend to happen.
Well, it was Martin Brundle. He has gone into the pits. He hasn't gone out, and it looks as though his race has been run. He probably won't be all that unhappy about it, because although he's a very gritty, determined, and one of the most experienced Grand Prix drivers of them all, he has been having, as I said earlier, a really torrid time with the Jordan here in Argentina. But it's up front where the action is, and you are watching it on lap 38. Hill, he's easing away. Now he's 1.3 seconds, I think more than that at the present moment, ahead of Michael Schumacher, who has got Alesi getting closer and closer all the time. but the closer Lacey gets in some ways, the more difficult it is for him, because the front wing of his Benetton will get into dirty air from the Ferrari in front, which we're riding with now. Michael Schumacher second, and Lacey will be in danger of losing downforce on the steering front wheels, which makes it, of course, extremely difficult to get by. And Damon Hill has just put up the fastest lap of the race as you watch Jack Villeneuve in 5th position, 2 seconds behind Gerhard Berger and gaining, and Hill's time 1 minute 30.116 has broken Schumacher's lap record of 1995. Damon Hill is on his way.
This really is a fabulous race, to have these 3 different teams with some 5 different drivers, all within a few seconds of each other by just past the midpoint distance, is certainly a first for a very long time. And we've only got a little bit of that to attribute to the safety car, and that's the closing up of Villeneuve. And in fact, Villeneuve was only behind because he lost out so badly at the original start. So we've got very, very evenly matched cars, and this, the Schumacher is really coming under a pressure from a Lacey there. Not much between these cars in straight line speed, so again, it's going to be very difficult for any overtaking maneuver to be carried out. But I think Damon Hill is really having to drive for his life here. Damon is under more pressure here than he has been at any point in a race so far this year. At Melbourne, he was well clear of Eddie Irvine in 2nd place, being basically held up a little bit by Jacques Villeneuve until Villeneuve had his problem. In Brazil, Damon had a between 12, 15, 18 second lead relatively comfortably. Here, at half distance, he's only now got 2.7 seconds. He's really putting on the pressure. He set another fastest lap. Hill is responding to this pressure marvelously. He really is a much more confident, much more mature driver this year, I feel. He's made very few mistakes throughout the year. He's really driving as perfectly as anybody could, and this is the manifestation of it. All that pressure from Schumacher, from Lacey, from Berger, from Villeneuve, and he's relentlessly pulling out faster laps, lap by lap, easing away. He's driving within himself. He's not getting ragged. This really is excellent, disciplined driving.
But look at the veteran 182 race Gerhard Berger as you watch Luca Badoer ticking away about something, I suspect the marshals. And we're with Schumacher now. Right behind him is a Lacey, and right behind him is Gerhard Berger. Now, Berger's been lapping faster than a Lacey. Villeneuve has been lapping faster than Berger, and Damon Hill is lapping faster than Eddie Irvine. Lap 40, 72-lap race. Hill leads now by 3.6 seconds. And remember, when they restarted on lap 31, Damon Hill had got Schumacher right behind him. So in just 8 laps, he has pulled out a lead of 3.6 seconds. An absolutely masterly performance. He was superb in Australia, he was magnificent in Brazil, and he's the same here in Argentina. And those are the Ferrari mechanics waiting to greet somebody in.
And I don't think it's Michael Schumacher. You can see that Eddie Irvine is just 7/10 of a second behind Verstappen, who's 6/10 of a second behind Coulthard in 6th place. It's my guess that they may be feeling that they're going to bring Irvine in. He's not making any progress. He's being held up by traffic, and by bringing Irvine in now and putting in enough fuel probably to get to the end of the race, and if that's the case, let's expect a 10-11 second fuel stop, then Irvine can make better use. He's being held up. I should be very surprised, not for the first time possibly though, if it's Michael Schumacher. And it is Michael Schumacher.
Oh, we all make mistakes. And Schumacher comes into the pit lane over the first white line. Now, the next one is the speed limit. This is it. So Schumacher comes in. And Lacey goes up into 2nd place. Berger to 3rd. Villeneuve to 4th. And I think David Coulthard may just get through and up into 5th place before Michael Schumacher rejoins the track. They're either putting a lot of fuel in or there's a problem. 12.6 seconds is a pretty long stop. Out then of the pit lane goes Michael Schumacher, and out of the race goes Pedro Lamy. So that is both the Minardis out of the running, because Tasso Marquez has already retired. Back with Michael Schumacher, and Tony Jardine is with retiree Martin Brundle.
Martin, the end of an awful weekend for you, really terrible. What happened in the final act?
Well, actually, the race wasn't going too bad. I was on a one-stop strategy, so I was now about to run to the end, and it was not too bad. There's a chance of some points, without doubt. I passed one of those green things, I don't know who's driving it, and about 2 corners later, he obviously had brain fade and ran into the back of me, but from what I saw, the wing didn't come off immediately. I carried on, but I was just looking in my mirror to be sure, and it actually fell off there and then, but clearly it takes 20 minutes to replace that. It's quite an integral part of the back end of the car, so it's an early show.
Thanks, Martin. Hard luck.
Thanks.
Lap 41, and as Pedro Lamy athletically leaps over the wall, look back down the track behind Damon Hill, and there are the two Benetton, second and third, followed by Villeneuve in fourth place. Schumacher, after his second pit stop, is therefore down into fifth position. Jean Alesi, where with him now is the fastest man on the track. The first lap in under 1 minute 30 seconds. He's well and truly shattered Damon Hill's recently established lap record, which had beaten David Coulthard's. And by the way, Schumacher, following that pit stop, is now down to 8th position, behind Verstappen, who is in the points in 6th position in the Arrow's heart. And Schumacher's following his teammate Eddie Irvine, who beat him in Australia. Quite a turn up for the book. But there are the two Benettons battling on lap 42. Alesi, the fastest man on the track, is second. Berger is third, and Alesi is 4.6 seconds behind Hill.
Well, let's just reflect back to that second stop of Michael Schumacher. It certainly surprised me, as was patently clear. But why did he do it? Was it a sudden prompted thing? Why did they choose to come in so early? Schumacher's first stop wasn't particularly short, so it didn't look as if he'd taken on that little fuel at the first stop. However, the length of stop at 12.6 seconds that we've just seen indicates to me that now Schumacher is able to continue on right to the very end of the race. Now, quite why he's opted to go that route, one can only assume that there wasn't a great deal of fuel left in that Ferrari, and therefore he had to come in. He wasn't being held up by anybody. But it does now mean that we've got quite an interesting difference in strategy. Let's just consider, we're now on lap 43, the 2/3 distance, when we will expect to see, hopefully I'm right on this occasion, Alesi, Berger, Hill and Villeneuve come in for their second stop. Should be round about lap 48. That's still some 5 laps away. That's going to be their second stop and their final stop. But it looks to me as if Michael Schumacher has already made his final stop. Whilst just behind Schumacher, we've got Rubens Barrichello, who I suspect has made his final stop, providing the fuel tank on that Jordan was big enough to get enough fuel in, and when he stopped at lap 30, when the safety car came out to get to the very end. So we've got quite an interesting race developing.
And Jean Alesi is actually catching Hill a little bit at the moment. He took out half a second from the Englishman's lead. That is the man, Jean Alesi, and he really is flying. And Villeneuve and Berger, 4th and 3rd respectively, are coming towards you now. There is the Austrian in the Benetton Renault, and he finished in 4th position in the Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne. And the gap between Berger and Alesi is reducing too. So Berger is going extremely quick. We're on lap 43. Damon Hill is leading by some 4 seconds, just under 4 seconds now. Alesi is certainly cutting into his lead. And there is the battle, 3rd and 4th, Berger and Villeneuve.
And there is the evidence, too, of just how much Alesi is cutting into Hill's lead. The 4.4 in brackets means that Alesi was 4.4 seconds behind Damon Hill. At that point, the 3.9 without the brackets is the current gap. 3.9 seconds. He was therefore half a second faster. So just 3.9 seconds from Hill for Alesi, and we need to watch this gap because these two are both on the same strategy. Now there is the first of the Benetton pit stops coming up. This could be the chance again for potentially Berger to get ahead of Alesi, but Berger is nearly 3 seconds behind, so I don't think we're going to see any position changes this time from these refueling stops, but it certainly is going to be crucial to make sure there are no mistakes.
Yeah, and look at this. This is Verstappen, Irvine and Schumacher, 6th, 7th and 8th, and Verstappen, Irvine and Coulthard, my apologies, and Eddie Irvine in the background. Here coming towards us is David Coulthard, who is in 5th position. There's Jos Verstappen. Brilliant. He was terrific in Brazil. He has been nothing short of sensational here in Argentina in the practice and qualifying. He's keeping it up in the race, in the points. Eddie Irvine. Now, is Irvine catching them or not? The answer is no. He was actually 0.3 of a second slower into the pit lane with second place Jean Alesi in the Benetton Renault. This will be his second stop. This is his second stop. Watch the man with the lollipop. Out of the way he goes and stalls his engine. And that, of course, is costing him dear. Berger is through, Villeneuve is through. They've got to get the starter out, and Alesi will be fuming in the cockpit at his own problem. That was his problem and not his mechanic's problem. He's lost a lot of time, a lot of space, a lot of places on lap 45 out of 72. With Damon Hill now some 7 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger as Schumacher goes round.
And Benetton, I suspect, will be reflecting even now that that is the difference between, or one of the differences between Alesi and Schumacher. Alesi is undoubtedly very quick, but that was a driver mistake, stalling the car. It appeared that he drove away quite okay once the engine was restarted. And sadly for us, that could be, it's certainly going to be a major handicap to any kind of challenge that Alesi was going to put to Damon Hill. And that cost him probably 4 seconds from that mistake, maybe 5. And that's going to take an enormous amount of closing up on the track.
Damon Hill, lap 45, coming through to complete it. In control, as he has been the whole race. Look down the straight, and that is the gap between him and the second-placed Gerhard Berger. That's the gap in distance. The gap in time is 8.5 seconds. The second Williams Renault is now up into third place, so they are on a potential 14 points in the Constructors' Championship, which they already lead by 17 points from the Benetton team. Damon Hill looking good, his tyres shining in the light, his slick tyres, and Alesi now has got the Ferrari in front of him as he comes down the start and finish straight at some 165 miles an hour. Schumacher ahead, Alesi going through, is he? Is Schumacher going to back off? He has to. And Jean Alesi forces the Ferrari wide, and Barrichello is taking his chance as well because he's up alongside Michael Schumacher, and he's going through. Now, Schumacher was really wrong-footed. He's lost 2 places. Is he going to lose the third?
I think
yes.
Schumacher is in trouble. There's no doubt Schumacher is cruising. He's in trouble. Maybe this relates to his early pit stop. You can see there he's whether he's about to retire or not, I don't know, but the old soaring at the wheel, well, he's just had on a chunk of it there, but he's obviously got some kind of a problem with that Ferrari, and that's why everyone's going by him. Although it didn't look to start with as if Alesi had pulled out some tremendously spectacular manoeuvre. But Alesi will definitely have the bit between his teeth now. We'll have to have a look to see just how quickly he can go. He's got a little bit of a gap until the car in front of him. Now there's that manoeuvre of Alesi. He comes up the inside of Michael Schumacher. But Schumacher has a bit of a look at closing the door, but he's not fighting particularly hard, and now we know the reason why, because Schumacher has some problem with the Ferrari. And incidentally, I should just clarify the point that at Brazil we thought that the Ferrari had gone off because a push rod broke. In fact, it's transpired that the push rod broke after the Ferrari went off the road and not before.
Schumacher coming into the pit lane. He turns off before lap 16. We're with him in the approach to his garage now. He had completed 46 laps, and you can see now he turns in now. Is this retirement? Indeed it is. Schumacher turns into the garage to retire as he did in Australia. He's only finished 1 Grand Prix this year. That's the enormous Buenos Aires in the background, and that was in 3rd place in Brazil. Well, he has always said quite openly that there is still an enormous amount to do on the Ferrari, and he's looking forward to doing it. Out of the race goes the Tyrrell of Ukyo Katayama. Sarlo, my apologies, it's Sarlo. So I thought he'd gone out earlier on, I'd missed him. Sarlo, who went off earlier on, is now out of the race. He was in 14th position, and on lap 48 now, as you watch the Williams coming towards you, and there in the pit is the Benetton. Out goes the Benetton Renault, and Damon Hill is leading on lap 48 by a very considerable margin, with his teammate Jacques Villeneuve up into third position. As into the pits now comes the other Ferrari of Eddie Irvine, who's now up into the points, or he was, because he was in fifth position, ahead of Jean Alesi, who you remember had that awful pit stop when he sat there for ages having stalled his engine. Out goes Irvine. He stopped twice. Alesi stopped twice. Berger has stopped twice. Damon Hill, leading by 10 seconds, has stopped once.
Now, these are all stopping on lap 48 when we expected as a second or two pit stops. And interestingly, going back to that slightly earlier stop, well, let's talk about Schumacher first of all. I think the reason that Schumacher stopped so early for that second one on lap 40 was because he reported that something didn't feel right with the car, the chassis, and the most likely thing in that situation is maybe a slow puncture. So the logical thing to do was to bring him into the pits and change his tyres, and of course at that time put enough fuel in to get to the end of the race. However, as it transpired and Schumacher discovered within a couple more laps that wasn't the problem, there was something else, and maybe we'll find out what it was before the end of the race. But then the next one we saw come in for a slightly earlier second stop was Jean Alesi. Now, if we go back to the first round of stops in the race, Alesi tried desperately hard with the Benetton team to get ahead of Schumacher by stopping for a shorter amount of time, and that would have meant putting in less fuel. Williams team ready, and by putting in less fuel, then he would have had to come in for his second stop rather earlier. So I think that completes the picture, and that's why we've seen the car stop when they have, and that's why now it looks going to be Damon Hill or Jacques Villeneuve. It was probably going to be Hill on the basis that he stopped earlier than Villeneuve the last time. But the race really very much in Damon Hill's control. We've got Berger in third place, Villeneuve in second place. And it's a good example in this race of how much opportunity there is in Formula One for things to go wrong. Things to go wrong, like the Ferrari having some kind of a problem for Michael Schumacher. Things to go wrong, like the driver, like Jean Alesi, making a little mistake, stalling the car and putting himself out of contention, at least perhaps losing 5 seconds. Now, let's hope none of those sort of problems afflict Hill, who once again, so far, has not put a foot wrong.
Yes, no discredit to Jacques Villeneuve, but let us not forget that he made up 47 seconds as a result of the pace car coming out and closing up the whole field. But he's now running in second place, 12 seconds behind Damon Hill. There is the Englishman on now his 50th lap out of 72, and it's beginning to look, and into the pit lane comes Villeneuve. Now, this is his second stop. He was 29 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger, who has already stopped twice, in third position, Berger. So Villeneuve should quite comfortably get out of the pit lane and rejoin the track, having observed the 75-mile-an-hour speed limit, which he's doing now, comfortably ahead of Gerhard Berger to go through at... Oh, does he? Now, there's a Benetton. There's a Benetton. And it is Gerhard Berger, so I was wrong, and Villeneuve has lost the place. So Hill leads on lap 50 out of 72. Berger moves up into second place in the Benetton Renault, having stopped twice. Villeneuve is third, there he is. David Coulthard, well and truly in the points in the McLaren. There are the McLaren mechanics waiting to bring somebody in, and it must be Coulthard because Hakkinen, of course, is long since out of the race. Coulthard fourth, Alesi fifth, some 5 seconds behind the McLaren. So when Coulthard comes in, I expect Alesi to move up a place into fourth position. Barrichello in the sole remaining Jordan is in sixth place. Johnny Herbert is seventh. Irvine is eighth. Panis is ninth. Verstappen is 10th. Montemini is in 11th place. And he is the last of the runners. 11 out of the 22 on lap 51. And you're watching Jacques Villeneuve catching Gerhard Berger. There's the Canadian, ahead of him the Austrian.
Well, the Williams pit are ready once again, and I think this time I really can't go too far wrong in saying that it will be Damon Hill coming in. It's obviously difficult to predict, and we look like we're going to have a continuation of the Berger-Villeneuve battle there. Let's hope so anyway. That is Damon Hill, that's the leader, and this is David Coulthard having the best race of his year so far, currently in fourth place, coming in for his final stop. Now watch the way here that McLaren and Williams certainly have until to date had different techniques. McLaren dropped the car down whilst the fuel is still going in then take the refueling hose off, and then the driver pulls out. Now, depending on the amount of fuel that goes in, Williams have kept the car up on the jacks until the refueling hose comes off, and then drop the whole lot down at once. We should get a chance to see if that is what they're going to be doing now when Damon Hill comes into the pit, and that should be very, very soon.
And he should be in very good shape to come in, stop, have a very careful and deliberate four-wheel change and more fuel in, because he comes in 31 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger at the end of the previous lap. He's got plenty of time to just come in, line his car up exactly with the jack in front of him. The jack behind him will slot into position and lift the Williams. Off come the four old wheels and tyres. On go the four new wheels and tyres. And although the seconds are ticking away, 7.7 seconds leaves Damon Hill in excellent shape.
Lovely pit stop there from the Williams team, and see the flashes, the telltale white flashes on the right front wheel. Damon Hill has got a new set of tyres on, I feel. I can't believe that there would just be a new tyre on the right front. Now that should help him. It should give him an even greater spurt in the last third of the race, because once again, just point out that these brand new tyres are probably worth 2 or 3 tenths of a second advantage for about 5 to 10 laps until they gradually even out with the performance of a used set of tyres. And by used, we mean tyres that have perhaps only got 6 laps on them, but nevertheless it still can make a difference.
Now I'm going to deliberately use the word if here. If Damon Hill wins this race, and he's still got 21 laps to go, including the one he's on, although he's looking very comfortable, extremely reliable, and a long, long way ahead of Gerhard Berger. If he wins this race, it will be his 4th successive win. He won the last Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide, that memorable event last year. He won the first Australian Grand Prix at Melbourne, that equally memorable event at the new venue this year. He won superbly in Brazil, having controlled the race all the way last Sunday. He's done the same thing here, starting from pole position and deliberately in the warm-up this morning, making sure that the car was ready for the race. You don't get any awards for being the fastest in the warm-up. People sometimes read far too much into it. Damon Hill was 4th fastest in the warm-up this morning, just under a second off the pace, and was very comfortable indeed with that. He's now on his 53rd race with that famous helmet colour scheme, the black background and the white stripes of the London Rowing Club, as Michael Schumacher walks up to his position on the pit lane.
Michael Schumacher's problem started during the pace car period. Something or somebody hit the rear wing, and the top of the rear wing actually was demolished, so he lost rear end downforce naturally enough. But worse than that, he got severe vibration from the rear end of the car, and then he decided to call it a day.
Well, so lest Ferrari are worried that we've misread the situation, let's make it perfectly clear that nothing wrong with the car. In terms of build or design, it was a nudge from the back that caused the problem, which excluded Michael Schumacher. And the McLaren of David Coulthard in front of us there has got a problem, because we're riding with Eddie Irvine in 6th place. There are the 2nd and 3rd cars of Berger and Villeneuve, with just about 0.8 of a second between them. That is Jacques Villeneuve. We're on lap 53 now. Damon Hill's lead after his 2nd pit stop is just over 11 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. That is Villeneuve in 3rd position. Lacey is 4th, some 10 seconds behind Villeneuve, and Barrichello is 5th. Coulthard is 6th. Eddie Irvine is in 7th place, looking for his 2nd points finish since he joined Ferrari at the beginning of the season from Jordan last year, because Eddie Irvine finished in 3rd position at Melbourne. Benetton. The Benetton of the enormously experienced Austrian Gerhard Berger, who had a lot of trouble adapting to the team when he tested last year's car, which had been set up for, indeed almost built for, Michael Schumacher. Berger's height militated against him, but away from that, this is the battle between Coulthard and Irvine. for the last points position. 6th place and 1 point that goes with it. Now, McLaren are only 4th in the Constructors' Championship at the moment, with a mere 5 points, none of which have been scored by David Coulthard, who failed to finish in both Australia and Brazil. He's been given a very hard time by Eddie Irvine, but Irvine's been given an equally hard time by Olivier Panis, the Frenchman in the Ligier, who is behind him, having finished 6th in Brazil.
I must say, this is a very impressive drive from Olivier Panis there, running in the sister Ligier Mugen car to that of Diniz, which exploded when that fire started. And Coulthard under a lot of pressure. This is David Coulthard's best race, as we've said. Eddie Irvine and David Coulthard have both struggled to keep up with the pace of their illustrious teammates in the shape of Häkkinen and, of course, Michael Schumacher. But for Panis to be right up there too, we've got another 18 laps of this race to run. We've then got Verstappen pretty close behind. It's certainly this battle for 6th place, which is where the action is, because Villeneuve is now, for some reason, sliding away from Berger. He's now 4.5 seconds away from Berger, and Hill is now 13.2 seconds ahead of Gerhard Berger. Now, Berger having his best race for a long time, but Damon Hill once again looking very comfortable indeed for what is what is likely to be, unless anything goes wrong for him, his 4th consecutive victory.
Yeah, but that battle for 6 is terrific. There's only 3 seconds between Coulthard, Irvine, Panis and Verstappen. And again, my heart goes out to Jos Verstappen. It's a sensational drive he's having here. Damon, lap 55. It's a case of a metronomic progression now for Damon Hill. He just needs to keep his car on the pace. He's lapping in 1 minute 30.4 consistently, compared with Alesi's fastest lap so far, 1 minute 29.5, which is exactly 1 second inside Michael Schumacher's lap record from last year in the Benetton Renault. Today, of course, he's in the Ferrari. So a second probably doesn't sound very much, and it isn't very much, but the difference between 10/10 and backing off a second to a racing driver can be quite a comfortable situation. And Hill is on his 56th lap now, clear track behind him. Here are the retirements that we've had, and there are 11 of them. Häkkinen went out first, followed by Bader when he turned his car over. Rosset retired the arrows. Katayama pulled off in the Tyrrell. Diniz, of course, had that colossal fire after 25 laps in the Ligier. Heinz-Harald Frentzen pulled off the track immediately after went off the track immediately after the safety car pulled in. Tarso Marquez tried to climb over the back of Martin Brundle's Jordan. Martin Brundle himself then retired. Mika Salo, who had gone off earlier on, retired the Tyrrell. Pedro Lamy did the same thing with the second Minardi Ford. Michael Schumacher has retired with a broken wing, which was hit in the pace car slowdown situation. And at the present moment, reading from the back as Damon Hill goes through to complete another lap, in 11th place in the 40 is Andrea Montermini, with Hill leading.
And we can just see in the background there is action in the pit lane. Benetton are getting ready for another pit stop. The tyre warmers are coming off, and there it is. It looks like Gerhard Berger coming in for a 3rd stop.
Now, Villeneuve goes up into 2nd position, and there is no way that Gerhard Berger on lap 57, when he comes out in the 72-lap race, in my opinion, is going to be able to catch Villeneuve and prevent a Williams 1-2, which is what it's looking like at the present moment, which is what happened in Melbourne, with Damon Hill just beating Jacques Villeneuve. There were 16 points in the Constructors' Championship for the Williams team in Australia, and it looks at the present moment, although I make the caveat that, as usual, that there is some way to go, that it's going to be the same here.
Now, perhaps we'll hear from Tony Jardine, but maybe Gerhard Berger had a puncture with that second set of tyres. That was what caused him to slip back there from Villeneuve, and that's when he came in for a new set of tyres.
In fact, that's absolutely right, Jonathan. Not actually a puncture, but severe blistering of the tyres, and they're just being rolled away in front of me at the moment. Totally unscheduled stop. It caught everybody unawares. They rushed out with the tyres, and in fact the mechanics weren't getting any signals from the pit wall, and they were pointing towards the huge refueling machine and asking whether they needed fuel as well. So it was all quite desperate, but they coped well in the end.
Jonathan, you've done it, and I haven't been in a racing car in a commanding position in the closing stages of a race. We're on lap 58 out of 72 now, and Damon Hill is leading his teammate Jacques Villeneuve by 19 seconds, coming up to 20 seconds. What's going to be going on in his mind? Is he going to be hearing these noises from the engine that don't exist, etc.?
Well, I'm not sure that he really is now. I think Damon Hill has got very used to being out in front. He's got used to dominating Grand Prix. He feels it's his natural place, and quite rightly so too. And he's going to know he's now got an 18.8-second lead, and that is one of the Benettons, of course. It is Gerhard Berger. Well, we know he had another set of tyres on. Whether or not he's had an engine problem or some kind of problem that's literally stopped the car, or whether or not he's spun off by going out hard on that next set of tyres, we don't know. I mean, maybe he's had another problem with the car that he thought was a problem with the tyres that's now affected it. We may get a replay. Let's just hope so. But as we look at Damon Hill, let's just consider, you may wonder what makes the difference between the truly great racing drivers and the very good. What are they doing inside the car that makes them faster? Well, a lot of the development, a lot of the gain that they have really comes from just how fast they can enter the corner. There's Gerhard Berger. Been a good drive for Berger, sadly come to an end again, we don't know why. But coming back to this point about what makes the best drivers, the really skillful drivers have the ability to actually get into the corners faster than others. They don't need to slow down as much to turn into the corner. They have the car control to brake very late, yes, but often not brake as much either, to come off the brakes earlier, having slowed down less. So we're only talking about maybe just 2 or 3 or 4 miles an hour. But carrying that extra speed into the corner is what saves the precious tenths of a second. Getting on the power earlier, coming out of a corner, is less of a challenge, because the penalty for getting on the power too early is that the car will slide, and the recovery is relatively easy. You simply lift off the power. The really committed part, though, is how fast you can turn into these corners. And that's where Michael Schumacher has been so dominant, and that's where every teammate of Michael Schumacher will tell you that he's so impressive. They just can't understand how he can get into the corners as fast. And, of course, generally, if you come into the corners fast, you come out of them fast.
That's the fastest man on the track, and he is Jacques Villeneuve in second position. But I tell a lie, because as I say that, Jean Alesi goes quicker, and he has reduced Jacques Villeneuve's gap in front. Villeneuve in second place, Alesi in third position, to 10.5 seconds by going round 1.4 seconds faster than the Canadian on the previous lap. Now, as far as Damon Hill is concerned, it's keep it smooth, keep it reliable, watch his braking points, watch his line. Hill leads, Villeneuve second, Alesi is third. Rubens Barrichello in the Jordan is in fourth position, having failed to finish so far this year. Eddie Irvine is fifth in the Ferrari. Coulthard is sixth, and then seventh Verstappen, eighth Parnis, ninth Johnny Herbert. Berger is out, only 10 cars are running, and the last of them is Andrea Montermini in the 40. So we have had 12 retirements out of the 22 starters. Damon Hill on lap 60. Now that is the man to watch. Jean Alesi from Avignon. This is his 105th Grand Prix. He's only won one of them, and that was the Canadian Grand Prix for Ferrari at Montreal last year. And aptly enough, he's chasing Canada's Jacques Villeneuve, second position. The gap was 10.6 seconds on the previous lap. Villeneuve has responded. He's either got a message from the pits or done it on his own initiative as Gerhard Berger walks in. And Villeneuve's previous lap was 1/10 of a second faster than Alesi. The gap remains at 10.6 seconds. Hill ahead of Johnny Herbert now. That's Hill coming towards us. Herbert in the Sauber Ford Cosworth V10 is in ninth position, and that's behind Damon Hill.
Well, I'd like to be looking at Jos Verstappen now. He's just 0.2 of a second behind David Coulthard in his McLaren. This is a fantastic performance. That is David Coulthard, and breathing down his neck. We may even see, if we're very fortunate, the front of the Arrows car have a bit of a look down the inside somewhere, although I suspect not, because at this point on the circuit, all that David Coulthard has got to do is to keep it neat and precise. And that is Rubens Barrichello. He is in 4th place, just ahead of Eddie Irvine there. Barrichello having, and that is exactly what's happened. Jos Verstappen has overtaken David Coulthard, and that is another into the first corner there. Jos Verstappen driving absolutely superbly. That really is a David versus Goliath battle, because the McLaren team has a very, very healthy budget, one of the best budgets in Formula One. I suspect that the budget of the Arrows team is probably about 1/4, if that, of the amount of the McLaren team, and the Mercedes engine that powers the McLaren is there pitched against the little Hart engine, a V8 engine built by 30 men of Brian Hart's down in Harlow. So quite a fantastic achievement, and a very much a team achievement. I'd like to emphasize that too. Verstappen is certainly one of the stars of the future. 3-4 years on from now, I think Verstappen will be in the equivalent of the Williams, possibly the Williams, as being a World Championship contender. But Arrows have got a very good chassis. He wouldn't be doing it without that, and that little Hart engine has proved to be more than a measure for its more affluent competition, certainly in terms of straight line speeds as well. And that, after all, is what an engine is all about. But particularly, a benefit of the Hart engine is that it pulls well out of the corners. It's a responsive engine to drive. When the driver puts his foot down halfway around a corner, the engine immediately picks up nice and smoothly and progressively. And on these twisty circuits, that's a real asset.
And I'm sure if Tom Walkinshaw is watching, he will be listening to Formula One saying, make the investment in the Hart, Tom. They need the pneumatic valves, and that engine, which is already superb, could be absolutely magnificent. But you're watching Rubens Barrichello now. He's in 4th position. We're on lap 62, just another 10 laps, including the one that Damon Hill is on, for the Englishman to go to make it 4 victories in a row. Australia, Brazil, Argentina. Villeneuve is 17 seconds now behind Damon Hill, not looking a threat. Their times are almost identical. You're watching Eddie Irvine, who's 5th, and Jean Alesi is now 9 seconds behind Villeneuve. His previous lap was marginally quicker, but the Williams team are obviously keeping both Damon Hill and Jacques Villeneuve very closely in touch through the radios with the developments on the track, and I can't see the order changing at the present moment unless one of the 3 of them has some sort of a problem. Rubens Barrichello in that 4th position, failed to finish in Australia, failed to finish in Brazil, thoroughly deserves a finish for himself, for Jordan, and for the Peugeot engine. And we're riding with Eddie Irvine, who's some 12.5 seconds behind the Jordan Peugeot. Real encouragement for them, not much for Ferrari, and 6th is Verstappen, 5 seconds behind Irvine.
Now let's see if we can see those gear change lights on the top of that steering wheel where it's flattened off. There they go, just behind the graphic. Eddie Irvine will just be seeing that out of the corner of his eye, out of his peripheral vision, flicking the levers on that steering wheel, going up through the gears. This is where he should be doing it. Look at them, up to 16,500 maybe each time. Flicking his right-hand fingers to pull on that gear change indicator going up, and then he'll come all the way down with his left hand to change down again. And also, when we look at the front of these cars, particularly, look how delicate the suspension linkages appear to be. But, of course, in the line of the stresses that they're supposed to take, they are incredibly strong. We're looking at the front of Damon Hill's car there. Those angled rods coming up from the front wheels, those are the push rods. Those transmit all of the force from the bumps, from the downforce, into the springs that are tucked up inside the nose of that car. And there can be as much as 3 tons of load going up through those push rods, which don't appear to move. They look as if they're rigid to us, but believe me, they're moving maybe 2 or 3, maybe 5 millimeters. That's all it is, and that's all the suspension movement that these cars have. You might think it's not worth having, but if you took it away and bolted the things up solid, they would be totally undrivable.
9 laps to go. There is Verstappen, the sensation of the Argentine Grand Prix, in the points, in 6th position. And if he finishes there, it's going to mean an enormous amount to the Arrows team, because their travel costs will go up, will be helped even more as a result of getting a World Championship point. The monies in Formula One are allocated on all sorts of parameters: winning, fastest laps, position in the race, finishing the race. And Damon Hill, touch wood for England, is looking like finishing the race. He's on his 64th lap now. And why is the Williams team so good? All sorts of reasons. They've got enormous continuity. Patrick Head at the top of their technical setup has been there for a long time, and with his colleagues has designed some magnificent Constructors' Championship winning cars. Adrian Newey, his designer, chief designer, is an enormously able chap. They have the Renault engine, and Frank himself, of course, who is an absolute master at getting the big, big, big money that a Formula One team needs.
So, 8 laps to run. Rubens Barrichello in 4th place with that Jordan. They made that very early, well, early for a one-stop, round about lap 30 with the safety car. Can they get to the end of this race, or will they have to refuel again? Let's hear from Tony Jardine down at the Jordan pit.
That's absolutely right, Jonathan, but what Jordan was saying to me just now is that stop, because of the pace car, was slightly early, but it was at the edge of their window. They are now trying to keep him out there. Rubens is trying to build up as much speed as possible and keep a distance between himself and Irvine. They're worried about Irvine, but they're ready for a splash and dash down here at Jordan just in case.
Well, Barrichello was 0.2 of a second faster than Irvine on the previous lap. Irvine is 13.5 seconds behind him with only 8 laps to go. So it's looking good for Rubens Barrichello and the Jordan team to get 3 points for finishing in 4th position with Hill. There he is. There are only 10 cars left in the race now. We thought this was going to be a race of attrition. In my mind, I was thinking about 8 cars would finish the race. It looks as though it's going to be marginally better than that, because they're all looking good, reliable and quick now.
Well, that's interesting to know from the Jordan team down there, from Tony Jardine. Now, if they're going to go for a splash and dash, they're probably going to have to make that decision with about 4 laps to go, or him come in with 4 laps to go. Now, that's unlikely to be achieved in less than a loss of about 15, 16, maybe 17 seconds. Barrichello is 13 seconds ahead of Eddie Irvine, who is 3.5 seconds only ahead of Jos Verstappen. So Barrichello needing to come in for a further top-up of fuel could drop him back to 6th place. It would elevate Eddie Irvine to 4th and Jos Verstappen to 5th. But Verstappen is closing at a rate that's consistent with him being right on Eddie Irvine's tail in the final few laps of the race. And, well, just maybe he's got by David Coulthard, and the Ferrari is no faster in a straight line, or little faster in a straight line, than the McLaren with the Mercedes engine. So it's not inconceivable that Jos Verstappen could fight his way up to 4th place in the Argentinian Grand Prix, and that would just cap a truly sensational race from Jos Verstappen. It cannot be understated. It really is quite superb what this man has done.
Damon Hill flicks the Williams Renault through the S's up to turn 11, then down to turn 12, the short straight into the Senna S. You saw the board in the pit lane, which is telling him, as well as the radio information he's getting, that he's some 16 seconds ahead of his teammate Jacques Villeneuve, making it a 1-2 for the Williams Renault team, as Damon comes through now to complete his 66th lap. So lap 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. 6 laps each of 2.6 miles to go between Damon Hill and a potential 4th successive Grand Prix win. Another 10 World Championship points. Villeneuve would still be in 2nd position, with Damon further ahead as a result of 10 points for him and 6 for Villeneuve. But Jean Alesi, who is now the fastest man on the track, would be in 3rd position. And Tony Jardine has Gerhard Berger.
Gerhard, you were looking really good there, and then suddenly you dive back into the pits. Tell us what happened.
Unfortunately, I could control Villeneuve. I was catching Hill. And then when I saw he goes into the pits again, the big tires, I was sure I'm going to have a good chance to win this race, because I had not to come in anymore. I was in good shape. And everything was fine, and I come on the back straight, I brake the right front wheel, lift off, like I have a puncture in the rear. So I come back to the pits, stop the car to change tires, And then when I went out, they told me there's no puncture. Then I was sure that's suspension. I went round the first corner. The car moved again in the same way, and I stopped the car.
Gerhard, thank you very much. Hard luck.
Gerhard Berger sounding incredibly like his Austrian countryman Niki Lauda, and Damon Hill is on lap 67. Jean Alesi being held up a bit by the 40 of Andrea Montemini is the quickest man on the track. He's broken the lap record again, 1 minute 29.4. That's over a second faster than last year's lap record by Michael Schumacher, and he's only 6.5 seconds behind Villeneuve. But they're on lap 68 now, 4 to go, and I don't see that Alesi can possibly catch Villeneuve, never mind get past him. But it could be very close indeed.
No, it's a brave effort from Alesi, and it's wonderful to watch him really putting the hammer down, really doing whatever he can to close up to Villeneuve there. Of course, the real frustration of it is that he should be ahead of Villeneuve. If he hadn't stalled that Benetton on that second stop, he wouldn't be behind Villeneuve, and then he will be looking at taking second place clearly in the championship. He's currently tying with Villeneuve, both on 6 points. Hill leads with 20. And so the Villeneuve-Alesi battle, which I think will rage on throughout this season, the two are going to be pretty evenly matched, not just here, but virtually every Grand Prix we go to is going to go in the favour of Villeneuve. That's the way it looks, but we've still got another 4 laps to go, and you can see Alesi there has slipped back 0.3 of a second from Villeneuve. I think it's pretty much all over. He's going to keep trying. He knows no other way, but second place does look secure for Villeneuve, which underlines yet another dominant effort from the Williams team. In many ways, Williams make the rest of the Formula One, well, they must wonder what they have to do to try and compete with the Didcot, or in fact now Wantage Mark. Didcot, Williams rather, have been dominating Formula One for a long time now, in the same way that McLaren dominated Formula One in the late 80s and early 90s. It's now very much Williams' domain. And I think in their favour is undoubtedly the tremendous leadership from Frank Williams, and particularly Patrick Head on the technical side, and the stability of the team too. Head is somebody who is fundamentally involved with the team. He was involved with the team from the foundation, and they built up a very, very solid, dependable team of engineers, of mechanics, of draftsmen, all the people, amongst some 200 people, as with Benetton, as with McLaren, who go into putting together one of the finest Grand Prix teams ever. And Williams are gradually closing up on the number of record Grand Prix victories, currently held by Ferrari on 105 and McLaren on 104, but Williams are well into the 80s now, and if the next few years go as the last few years have, they could well be taking the lead of the most Grand Prix won by any team since Grand Prix racing began in the early 50s.
Damon Hill leading in Argentina on lap 69 out of 72. Not a particularly brilliant race for Ferrari. Schumacher out and Eddie Irvine in 5th position. Not a particularly brilliant race for Benetton. Alesi 3rd, but Berger out. A fabulous race for Williams again, looking like 1st and 2nd as they were in Australia. A very, very disappointing race again for McLaren, because Coulthard is out of the points now. He's in 7th position, and Mika Häkkinen long since retired. Parnis for Ligier is in 8th position, and Diniz retired a long time ago with that fire. Jordan have got Rubens Barrichello in 4th position, and Martin Brundle has retired. It's not been a good race for the Sauber team, because although Johnny Herbert is in 9th position, he's been lapped, and Frentzen is out of the race a long time ago. A brilliant, brilliant, brilliant race for Arrows and Hearts, with Jos Verstappen in that 6th position. Rosset has retired, but Verstappen's success more than makes up for it. A poor race and a very disappointing one for the Tyrrell team, with both their drivers, Katayama and Salo, out of it. Equally disappointing for Minardi, with both Lamy and Marquez out of the race. Badeur retired for 40 when his car was tipped over, as you saw, and Andrea Montemini is the last of the runners in 10th position, and Damon Hill is now on his 70th, 7-0 race, a lap out of 72. Villeneuve is 17 seconds behind him. That is the French-Canadian. He was 2nd in Australia. He was out of the race, of course, in Brazil in those wet conditions when he slid off the track. But it looks as though he's going to be his second Formula One finish in his third Formula One race. A tremendous achievement. Jean Alesi is 5.7 seconds behind Villeneuve, lapping consistently quicker, but not closing the gap enough to get close enough to the Frenchman to challenge for the second position. And Barrichello is 33 seconds behind Alesi. Irvine in fifth position is 7.7 seconds behind Barrichello and 3 seconds ahead of Verstappen, who is 9 seconds ahead of Coulthard. So Jos Verstappen is the man of the race in many ways, with Damon Hill, of course, that you're looking at on now his 71st and last lap but one.
An absolutely fantastic performance once again now from Damon Hill. We're coming to expect that of this man this year. He could have done no more. Pole position, he led off the line, and that can't be taken for granted. He made no mistakes despite a lot of pressure from Michael Schumacher. He kept his cool when the safety car came up and closed the race right up against the back of his neck. And he then pulled off and he shrugged away the challenges, and that's all. That looks like one of the, that's Herbert perhaps in the Sauber car. It is indeed a big moment there. Eddie Irvine coming by. Well, Irvine was ahead of him anyway. So, but back to Hill. Absolutely superb. He's shrugged off the challenge now for 2 races from Jacques Villeneuve, who looked to be such a threat in the very first race of the year. And I think Damon Hill has well and truly emerged from the shadow of his father. He really is on his way to becoming one of the Grand Prix greats. But behind him, Jacques Villeneuve didn't give up at all when he dropped back from 3rd to 9th off the grid. He tore by 3 or 4 cars certainly within the first 10 laps, which is not easy even when you're back in 9th place. But he came through and he too made no mistakes, and to finish second is going to be a good result. He'll be fairly happy with that. Alesi, though, will be frustrated with that 3rd place. He knows that second should have been his, but at least he's asserting himself once again as a dominant force, driver-wise, in the Benetton team. And Alesi is going to be up for a Grand Prix win this year, sure. He needs to be careful not to make the little mistakes like stalling in the pit lane. It was that caused him the loss of this second place. And then Berger, well, he was on the way to having his best race of the year until he had what was probably a suspension problem. We've yet to see Barrichello come in, so I think he must certainly stay out there and take a finely judged 4th place. Eddie Irvine 5th, but Jos Verstappen settled in 2.7 seconds behind Irvine in 6th place. But again, a superb drive from the young Dutchman, Verstappen, to take 6th place. The Arrows team will be absolutely euphoric.
As will Williams, as Damon Hill for the last time exits the Senna S's, named after the great Brazilian, clears turn 15. Turn 16 is the last turn on the track, and Damon is already acknowledging the applause as Damon Hill wins in Argentina, wins a Grand Prix for the 4th time in succession. Australia 95, Australia 96, Brazil 96, now Argentina 96, as Jacques Villeneuve finishes second, with Jean Alesi a mere 2.6 seconds behind him after a terrific last lap. And between 1st and 3rd, Damon Hill, there he is, and Jean Alesi in the Benetton, 14.7 seconds. Fastest lap in Argentina to Jean Alesi. Poetic justice, a fine drive. 1 minute 29.4, 1.1 seconds inside the previous lap record, in spite of those appalling bumps around this track. And in 4th position will be Rubens Barrichello. He's just crossing the line as I talk to you. Eddie Irvine should be the next man in about 3 seconds time in the Ferrari for 5th position. He's just crossed the line, and Jos Verstappen will finish, and does finish, in 6th position and scores a World Championship point for himself, for Arrows and for Hart. Terrific. David Coulthard has finished 7th. Parnis has finished 8th in the Ligier. Johnny Herbert, is he going to finish? Yes, he has finished because he was a lap down. Only the top 8 are on the same lap at the end of the race, and there are 10 finishers out of the 22 starters. Jean Alesi acknowledging the plaudits of the crowd and running to a standstill. Now, has he run out of fuel, or has something gone wrong with the Benetton? For sure there's a problem, because no driver wants to stop out on the circuit when he could finish the lap and get into the Parc Fermé. Well, it looks as though Benetton have just made it for those 4 points.
I suspect Lacey's run out of fuel there. He looks too relaxed and too pleased with his Grand Prix to have had a problem at the very end, but we never know. But what I think is particularly exciting for 1996 Grand Prix racing is that the performance of not just Berger, but particularly a Lacey in the Benetton team are going to make it clear to everybody, and not least this man, Damon Hill, that Benetton are going to be a threat this year. They're closer here than they have been at any Grand Prix so far, and that looks like Eddie Irvine pulling off as well. So fuel apparently has either been extremely tight as people have got to the end of the race, a pair of Williams cars, first and second, or there have been some very unlucky breakdowns, or perhaps we should say lucky, because to have broken down, of course, one lap early would have had very different consequences. I suspect, though, it's fuel. But by the time that Ferrari get going with what is their complete 1996 car, and let's not forget, this car that Schumacher challenged with here so effectively today was an interim car, if you like, a bit of a cobble-up, and I'm sure Ferrari would admit that, between their 1995 back end and the 1996 car. Once Schumacher gets the all-96 car back again, settled, improved, then the threat to these two Williams drivers is surely going to increase. Benetton are probably going to get more competitive rather than less from the Williams team as Lacey and Berger get to grips with the Benetton and working with the team better. We really are in for a great season, but Damon Hill must surely be well on his way to the World Championship. He couldn't have wished for a better start to the season.
Indeed, no. That was a very, very happy Damon Hill, who is now leading the World Championship from his teammate, Jacques Villeneuve, by 18 clear points. He started off 14 points ahead of Villeneuve and Lacey. Now he's 18 points ahead of Villeneuve. In third position, there is the Canadian, looking very pleased, and justifiably so. Villeneuve is in second position in the championship, just 2 points ahead of Jean Lacey. Third, who is 4 points ahead of Eddie Irvine, who is 1 point ahead of Mika Häkkinen, fifth. And Michael Schumacher is in sixth position in the Drivers' World Championship with 4 points. Williams' lead in the Constructors' Championship is even more crushing than it was before. That's David Coulthard. It was 26 points at the beginning of this race. It's now 29 points ahead of Benetton, who are just 3 points ahead of Ferrari in third position. McLaren are down to fourth place, 5 points behind Ferrari, and 2 points ahead of a tie for fifth position in the Constructors' Championship between Jordan and Tyrrell. So the Grand Prix of Argentina has been a very mixed bag according to which constructor you were. And if you were Williams, you were very, very happy indeed.
Well, it's a bit of a graveyard of cars over there. We're at some point around the circuit, I think, in fact, at the final hairpin, with a whole load of cars there. That's Jean Lacey's Benetton being towed back to the pit lane. But we saw David Coulthard disconsolately getting out of his McLaren, and this cannot in any way be called a good race for McLaren. The result of being seventh place behind Jos Verstappen and just 0.8 of a second ahead of the Ligier of Olivier Panis is not good news for them, and there's clearly a lot of work that's got to go in to making sure that McLaren can get back up to the level of, this is a replay of the start, and back at the field, we know that out at the front, let's have another look, Damon Hill. And look at that slow start from Villeneuve. There goes Gerhard Berger leaping ahead. Hill takes the inside line. Schumacher has a look at the outside. Lacey chops across. But this is where Lacey has a good look at the inside, but fortunately a completely clean start. This was not the case last year, when on both starts that we had incidents. But the level of discipline, I think Formula One is becoming better in terms of driver discipline, there's no doubt about that. Our starts are cleaner now. There used to be a time a year ago when we were having a number of jump starts, particularly when the electronic jump start mechanism came into effect. But now the system works to perfection, and because the drivers know what is expected of them at the start, and that's not to move 1 inch, they don't move 1 inch, and they don't get penalties, and we all benefit from a cleaner start.
Carlos Reutemann on the right, the great Argentine driver who used to drive for Ferrari and Williams, and he's now the governor of Santa Fe province. But there's the happiest man in Argentina, without a doubt, joined by the second happiest man Damon Hill, number 1. Jacques Villeneuve, number 2 on the podium. And in third position, Jean Alesi, the national anthem. Superstar Damon Hill, 40 points from 4 Grand Prix, 30 points from the first Grand Prix of 1996. Another magnificent trophy for his growing collection at his Dublin home, and the second prize, of course, goes to Jacques Villeneuve, as Dickie Stanford on the right, who is the team manager of the Williams team, receives the Constructors' Trophy. Villeneuve on the left. Well done, Jacques. Well done, Damon. And well done, Jean Alesi. And well done, Renault. Again, the French team's V10, the French organisation's V10 engine has not just finished first, has not just finished second, but has finished first, second and third in the 2 Williams and Benetton teams. And that's Froilan Gonzalez, the winner of the 1951 British Grand Prix at Silverstone, who's just presented the champagne, and there's going to be another massive wastage of that magnificent liquid. Well, it's another Hill and Williams story here in Argentina, and richly deserved. Damon, as I've said before, was under colossal psychological pressure last year after 1994 and the Schumacher incident in Australia and subsequent ones in 1995. And he went quietly away in the winter, and he did 2 things. He worked very hard on his body, doing up to 6 hours physical training every day. He is astoundingly fit. Schumacher is a legendary man for fitness, but I think Damon is just as fit as he is. And the other thing he did was to work very hard on his head, thinking it all out, reaching an equilibrium, getting at peace with himself, and he's done it superbly well, and his record this year shows it.
He has indeed, and the results do show it, of course, but we also looked back then, whilst we're looking at the Williams cars, at the Jordan 2, and there must have been mere fractions of a litre of fuel left in that Jordan car, because with the telemetry systems these days, the teams would know down to the last 10 cc's how much fuel was left in the tank of that car. So accurate is the monitoring mechanism, and it would have been a very tense time. Barrichello surely would have been using less revs. Revs can consume the fuel, so he probably would have backed the revs down from maybe 16,000 to 15,000, maybe 14,000, just to keep him far enough ahead of Eddie Irvine. He was 14 seconds ahead. It dropped down to 9.5 by the end. So a very tense last few laps, and I'd love to know just how little fuel was left in that Jordan as it crossed the flag. Patently enough to get around the last lap, which is a bit more than might have been said for Alesi's Benetton. But there are the remains of the Ligier from Pedro Diniz after he had that, what was certainly an engine problem that ruptured one of the fuel lines, that caused that big, spectacular flash fire. There is the refueling nozzle, and it was certainly nothing to do with that. That point should be made quite clear. It would have been a mechanical part of the engine would have, I'm sure, cut through one of the fuel lines, and indeed the leakage would have been relatively short, or a small amount of leakage, but then it doesn't need much fuel. Here we are getting the exact, there's the smoke, that's from the engine blow up, boom! That was probably only about half a litre of fuel, and we can see it as I speak. The flames will be dying down as the cut-off mechanisms, there we go, the cut-off mechanisms are coming into place, and fortunately we then see Diniz jumping out of his Ligier.
And that dramatic replay is really the end of the two flyaway races for Formula One to Brazil and to Argentina. The next one is the Grand Prix of Europe at the fabled Nürburgring in 3 weeks' time. But here at Argentina, it's been another magnificent victory for Damon Hill and for the Williams team. First, second and third, with Jean Alesi in third position in the Benetton.
It must be great to be building up such a large lead.
It's a great day. It's a fantastic result for the Rothmans Williams Renault team, and naturally I'm delighted to have pulled off 3 wins to start the season. It's difficult to imagine it getting better than this, so I'm extremely happy.
Was it frustrating halfway through the race to lose the lead that you'd struggled so hard to build up?
Yes, naturally it was a bit disappointing to have the incident where the pace car came out to close everyone up, but then we just had to get on with it, and it was the same for everyone. And I don't know the result. Was the person okay? Because I saw there was a car upside down. I don't know what
Yeah,
happened.
they seem to be fine. It was Padua.
Okay.
Jacques, you must be pleased to have finished second, especially as you seem to have a difficult start.
Yeah, the start went really bad. The clutch slipped a lot, and a lot of cars got by me. Then we got up to 5th, and luckily for us, there was the pace car out, so we could catch up with the rest of the field.
Jean, you were closing very hard towards the end of the race on Jacques. Do you think if you hadn't had the problem in the pits, you might have been closing very hard on Damon and perhaps having the possibility to challenge him for the lead?
Honestly, I don't think so, because at the beginning of the race we were all together with Schumacher, and we were just able to follow each other, but never we were able to try anything, because on this track it's so difficult to get the right line and the right grip. How soon you are a little bit outside, you lose the control of the car. So I'm quite lucky to finish on the podium, because after my stall engine on the pit, after the pit stop, I was very lucky.
Damon, we had a great battle at Nürburgring last year. Can we expect the same in a few weeks' time?
I sincerely think so. I believe the competition's getting closer all the time, and it's going to be harder work from now on, but some exciting racing to come.
Gentlemen, thank you.